Chapter 350. Whoosh! Wu-Ming pulled out a moving blackboard and began to explain the power of both sides. In order to distinguish the 7 servants in my group and the 7 servants summoned by the enemy, now use N and O as the distinguishing words. Wu-Ming took out a pointer and knocked on the blackboard. New and old, it feels so perfunctory. Someone complained. Then use black and red. Hearing someone complaining, Wu-Ming knocked on the blackboard again and changed his mind. Now let's talk about the situation. Wu-Ming coughed and began his speech. According to Steno, the new 7 servants defeated the black berserker at the beginning, and I defeated the red berserker just now. The berserkers on both sides have already left. Although Hercules had 12 trials in the face of 7 servants, and all of them were not weak, naturally he could not survive. And the black archer? Well, I am familiar with him, so he is an ally. Wu-Ming was still thinking about whether to tell them that he was the master of the archer. After all, Wu-Ming's hands had been wearing gloves. Gadotsi and others did not find the command seal. After thinking about it, Wu-Ming decided not to tell them. In fact, it was just Wu-Ming's bad taste. And I know the black caster. In the current situation, he will definitely choose to help us. Not counting him, I, Black Archer, Red Assassin Steno and Red Archer O'Reilly, and Black Lancer Anna and Matthew. We already have 6 servants. Wu-Ming pointed out the advantages of his side. But the enemy's lineup is not weak. Wu-Ming began to point out the weaknesses. First of all, the black saber is the famous King Arthur. I don't know the real name of the rider, but the other side has the existence of the undead core. As soon as Wu-Ming finished speaking, Olga, Marie and the others looked worried. King Arthur? Undead core. Both of these were very troublesome. Then there's the red team. We don't know the red saber's real name. We only know that he's a wretched man. However, to be able to hold the position of saber, he's definitely not a simple person, Wu-Ming said. Everyone nodded. As for Lancer, I think he's the most difficult to deal with right now. According to Steno's description, Lancer is very likely to be the great hero of India, Karna, Wu-Ming said calmly. Karna. Matthew and Olga Marie were shocked. So that's how it is. No wonder it gave me such a dangerous feeling, Steno said. If it's the hero who's doing charity, it's indeed very disadvantageous for us, O'Reilly added. What? Who is Karna? After all, Gadotsi had been an ordinary person before. She didn't know about Hindu mythology, so it was normal that she didn't know about Karna. He's known as the hero who's doing charity. He's a hero in one of the 2 great epics of India, the Mahabharata. He's said to be the son of the sun god Surya, the hero bestowed by the heavens, and the strongest enemy of Arjuna, Olga Marie explained. In the Mahabharata, Karna has a golden armor that's connected to his skin. It was given to him by his father, the sun god Surya, to protect himself. It's basically invulnerable, Wu-Ming explained. But his strongest weapon is the god-killing spear that he gave up the golden armor, Matthew said solemnly. God-killing spear? Indra tricked Karna into giving him the golden armor. Out of guilt, he gave Karna the lightning spear that can kill gods. It's undoubtedly a weapon against gods. At full power, no god can defend against it, Wu-Ming said nostalgically. Wu-Ming had fought Karna before and won. However, there was no doubt that Wu-Ming cheated. He was temporarily given the evil noble phantasm by the suppression force. He locked Karna as evil, and took advantage of the opportunity to hurt Karna, who had lost his golden armor. If Wu-Ming had fought Karna with Sodlek's saber rank, there was no doubt that Wu-Ming would have lost. No matter how much Wu-Ming disguised himself as Sodlek, Sodlek was still a human general after all. The mystery was different, and he was crushed by Karna. Wu-Ming shook his head to stop thinking about it. Especially the servants with divinity. Once Karna releases his noble phantasm, he'll most likely die. Wu-Ming's words hit everyone's heart quite hard. What's more, Karna is a brave warrior. His martial arts have reached the peak. Ordinary servants will soon be defeated if they fight against him. Wu-Ming looked at everyone and said earnestly, "At least you guys have no chance of winning." This sentence made Matthew and Anna lower their heads. That's right. One of them was a demi-servant, and the other was an immature child. It was indeed difficult for them to fight against Karna, who could kill gods. However, Stheno and Euryale didn't feel depressed. You're talking about us, not you, right? Euryale smiled. Hearing Euryale's words, Matthew and Anna raised their heads and looked at Wuming. This made Wuming feel helpless. I once met Karna with a different rank, and I was lucky enough to defeat him. This surprised everyone, especially Gadatsi. That's amazing, Mr. Assassin. But that's when I was in a different rank. If I were to fight Karna with my current assassin rank, I would definitely die. Wuming shook his head. But you can change your rank, right? Then change your rank, Olga Marie said casually. The others also looked at Wuming in agreement. I also said that there are conditions to change a rank. It just so happens that I don't meet the conditions at the moment. Wuming waved his hand helplessly. Then, how can we win this hero over? From the Mahabharata, we can see that he is a righteous man. Olga Marie thought for a moment and said quickly, impossible. Wuming directly denied Olga Marie's words. Why? Olga Marie slammed the table unconvinced. I fought with Karna, and in that battle I learned about Karna's character. Wuming poured himself a cup of tea and took a sip. He is a servant who completely obeys the master's words. He completely wants to turn himself into a weapon, even though the servant is the master's weapon, Wuming said, a little bored. Ah, then we are definitely going to lose. Gadatsi said, a little depressed. Senpai. Matthew wanted to comfort Gadatsi, but he didn't know what to say. After all, the enemy was too strong, and they couldn't win him over. That's why I brought you here, isn't it? Wuming smiled. Huh? Chapter 351. Do you mean that your companion here, the servant, can help us deal with Karna? Olga Marie was indeed one of the 12 monarchs. Although she was still young, her mind worked quickly. Yes, if she's steady, she can be said to be invincible. Wuming smiled slightly. Then, assassin, can you tell us her real name? Gadatsi asked curiously. Wait a minute, senpai. It's rude to ask for her real name as soon as we meet, Matthew said nervously. After all, the real name was the secret of every servant. Many times, the weakness of a servant could be known through the real name. Is it that serious? Gadatsi touched her head. After all, Gadatsi didn't understand these rules, so Wuming certainly wouldn't be angry. Don't worry, just knowing her real name won't affect her. Wuming smiled. The ancient king, the hero king Gilgamesh. That's her name. After Wuming said this, Olga Marie, Matthew, Stheno, and the others gasped. The hero king, Gilgamesh? Gadatsi asked in confusion. The ancient king who collected almost all the treasures in the world and cut off the connection between gods and humans. That's already the highest level of heroic spirit, Olga Marie said. I didn't expect that person to be attracted by the Holy Grail War. How ironic, Stheno said. Wuming knew what Stheno was talking about. The ancient king, who had almost all the treasures in the world and supreme power, was reduced to a servant and participated in the dirty magician ceremony. The Holy Grail War was a dirty ceremony, a war that was triggered by the selfishness of magicians using the weapons called servants. War was dirty. Whether it was in the name of righteousness or something else, the essence of war would never change. This was also why Joan of Arc felt that her hands were dirty. Even if the French army was the righteous side in the war between England and France, and even if Joan of Arc had been holding the holy flag on the battlefield and did not kill anyone, she still participated in the war. Because of her filth, she did not refuse the trial, did not argue for herself, and did not feel that it was unfair. She calmly accepted the burning at the stake. Wuming shook his head and stopped thinking about Joan of Arc. In short, the hero king Gilgamesh is definitely on our side. The direction is good. After Wuming finished speaking, everyone's heart sank. Although they hadn't seen that king, they were sure that he was very reliable. For now, let's stay here for one night. Let's not talk about Olga Marie. Tachika must be very tired. Gadatsi smiled embarrassedly when he heard himself being mentioned. I'm a little tired. Senpai, take good care of your body. Matthew said with concern. Ha ha ha, I know, Matthew. Gadatsi responded to Matthew and smiled happily. However, Wuming always felt that she was full of emotions. Wait a minute, Why exclude me? I'm also very tired. Olga Marie said rather angrily. Well, you're my master. How can you be tired so quickly? Be strong. Wu Ming teased Olga Marie. Damn it. Assassin, you bastard. Olga Marie felt that her brain must be abnormal to sign a contract with this guy in front of her. Ha ha ha, Wu Ming laughed and disappeared in spirit form. I'll go out and investigate the situation first. As for food, there are ingredients in the kitchen refrigerator. You can make it yourself. You can also familiarize yourself with this house and choose a room for yourself. Well, that's it. After that, Wu Ming's aura completely disappeared. Then forgive me for being rude, Steno said and stood up. Huh? Is the goddess going somewhere? Gadotsi asked in confusion. Of course, to a room. The goddess needs to rest. Riley replied and stood up with Steno. Master needs to rest. With that, Anna picked up the quiet Sakura Madu and followed her two sisters. Thank you. When they passed by Gadotsi, Anna's voice came softly. This voice made Gadotsi laugh. What? Aren't you being quite frank? After the three Gorgon sisters left, Olga Marie spoke. Seriously, they're all so willful. Olga Marie complained as she sat on the sofa and angrily drank tea. I feel like the director and assassin are very compatible, Gadotsi suddenly said as she looked at the complaining Olga Marie. What do you mean? I don't want that guy to be compatible. Seriously. Olga Marie glanced at Gadotsi and said calmly. Olga Marie's anger had almost subsided. After all, she got used to being angry. I'll go see what ingredients we have in the fridge. Matthew stood up and bowed to the two before walking to the kitchen. What's wrong with Matthew? Gadotsi asked after Matthew left. You noticed it too? Olga Marie crossed her arms and looked in the direction Matthew left. Yeah, Matthew is giving people the feeling that he has something on his mind. Gadotsi finished and stood up. I'll go take a look. With that, Gadotsi left. Yeah. After all, you're Matthew's master, Olga Marie said calmly as she watched Gadotsi leave. Really, when will my servant care about me? Olga Marie couldn't help but think of the only servant who was willing to contract with her, and the only one who could contract with her. In the kitchen, Matthew began to check the appliances after he found the kitchen. The gas furnace is normal. The electricity and drinking water are still there. That's great, Matthew said happily. After all, if the electricity and water were cut off, it would be terrible. Matthew. Suddenly, Gadotsi's voice came from behind Matthew. Hey, senpai, why are you here? Matthew turned around and looked at Gadotsi, who came in. Because I'm a little worried, so I came to see you. Gadotsi smiled. Foo. At this moment, an unknown white creature that looked like a squirrel, cat, or dog appeared at the entrance of the kitchen while making a foo sound. Ah, it's Fufu, Matthew shouted in surprise. Foo, the little guy called Fufu called out and jumped onto Matthew's shoulder. Fufu's wine glass disappeared when we were running away from Steno and Riley. I didn't expect it to find us. Gadotsi was surprised. Of course, senpai. Fufu is very intelligent. Matthew smiled and stroked Fufu while talking to Gadotsi. Fufu, on the other hand, looked very obedient. If Wu Ming was here, he would be surprised. Chapter 352. It's incredible, senpai. Fufu only appeared in front of the two of us. Matthew smiled. Maybe it's a coincidence. Gadotsi shrugged her shoulders. He didn't think about Fo's matter anymore, and Gadotsi told him the purpose of his visit. By the way, Matthew, what are you worried about? Gadotsi's words made Matthew fall into silence. Actually, senpai, I can't release my noble phantasm, and I don't know the real name of the servant that I possess. Matthew said softly. Is it important that you can't release your noble phantasm, and don't know the real name? Matthew is Matthew and that won't change. Gadotsi instantly held Matthew's hand. Gadotsi, who followed Wu Ming, Olga, Marie and the others, already knew the importance of noble phantasm. However, Gadotsi didn't think that Matthew was embarrassed because he couldn't release his noble phantasm. However, Matthew still looked very uncomfortable. I know, with Assassin Senpai, your safety won't be threatened, Matthew said little by little. That's not it. Gadotsi instantly interrupted. Matthew looked at Gadotsi with a stunned expression on his face. Assassin is very strong and reliable, but assassin is the leader's servant, and the only servant that can protect me is you, Matthew Gillett. Gadotsi grabbed Matthew's shoulders with both hands, and looked straight into Matthew's clear eyes. Fufu, who was originally on Matthew's shoulder, had already jumped away. Senpai. Matthew looked at Gadotsi with a somewhat helpless expression, and then he was touched. Since we can't release the relic, we'll ask for Assassin's help when he comes back. I'm sure Assassin will have a solution, Gadotsi encouraged Matthew. But the servant's real name? Why don't we ask Assassin later? Maybe he will know. Ahaha. Gadotsi laughed awkwardly. Really, you need someone else to confirm your servant's true name. Suddenly, Olga Marie's voice sounded. Gadotsi and Matthew turned around and saw Olga Marie at the kitchen door. Really, it's not easy to find a kitchen. Olga Marie complained casually. After all, our house was considered a small villa, and the structure was quite unique. Matthew and Gadotsi were lucky to be able to find them so easily. Sigh. Director, why are you here? Gadotsi's expression changed from embarrassment to confusion. Of course, I don't trust you to buy too. After all, there are only 2 of you in Chaldea. Olga Marie said impatiently. That doesn't Assassin count? Matthew raised his small hand and asked like a student. After all, Assassin is a servant with a special identity. Not to mention that he can't follow me back to Chaldea. With Assassin's identity, I don't think the small Chaldea can tolerate him. First, he could summon by himself, and now he could change his class. No matter how you think about it, Wuming was a guy with a super mysterious identity. How could Chaldea tolerate such a hero with a special mission? Moreover, the master can see the attribute value of his servant. In short, because you are too weak, you can't see Matthew's real name. Olga Marie said as she stretched out her hand to Gadotsi and pulled Gadotsi's cheek. It hurts. It hurts. Director, please be gentle. Gadotsi complained incoherently. Humph. In short, as long as you become stronger, you can see Matthew's ability value and his real name. Work hard. Olga Marie snorted and loosened her hand that pulled Gadotsi's cheek. Yes, I know. Gadotsi's eyes were filled with tears as he rubbed his cheeks. Matthew smiled awkwardly. Then Gadotsi seemed to remember something, so she asked Olga Marie. By the way, Director, do you know Assassin's real name? Gadotsi asked curiously. I'm also very curious about Assassin's real name. Mashu also looked at Olga Marie with a curious look. You two are so annoying. Hurry up and cook for me. Then, with Olga Marie's yelling, Matthew and Gadotsi began to busy themselves in the kitchen. How can I see something like a real name? I don't have master qualifications. If he didn't have such a cheating method, I wouldn't be his master. Olga Marie said lightly while looking at Matthew and Gadotsi busy in the kitchen. And I'm also a fake master. After Matthew and Gadotsi made some simple dishes, Wuming came back. However, Wuming returned with a rather disheveled big blue dog. A big blue dog? Gadotsi said doubtfully. That's a servant, can't you see it? Olga Marie refuted Gadotsi's words. Really, a servant in front of you can't even detect it, and it's not even an assassin. Olga Marie couldn't help but think. Yo ladies, the big blue dog greeted Gadotsi and others frivolously. Bang! Wuming gave him an elbow hit in an instant. A dash. Hey, I'm injured. Listening to his complaints, Wuming glanced at him with disgust. You almost left, so behave yourself, Cuculin. That's right, the big blue dog was Cuculin who caught Fergus's noble phantasm neon sword. After Wuming finished, he threw Cuculin on the sofa. Ha ha ha, but I have to say hello when I see the ladies. Cuculin was a little hurt, but he still looked frivolous. Cuculin? Is that the hero of the Long March of the Bulls? Sure enough, he looks like a playboy. Olga Marie looked at Cuculin's frivolous appearance and said awkwardly. He's the caster I said would help us. But now it seems that this guy can't even protect himself. Wuming spread out his hands. What happened? Gadotsi asked. This guy caught Fergus' noble phantasm. I didn't expect him to survive. Wuming held back his laughter and explained to everyone. Fergus? He's Cuculin's adoptive father and friend. Olga Marie was relieved. The neon sword you mentioned, is it the magic sword that can cut off 3 mountains? Yes, that's the sword. The identity of the red saber has been confirmed. It's that old rogue, Wu Ming said with a slightly angry expression. It seems that Assassin and Fergus must have experienced something. Gadotsi and others thought so. Ha ha ha, it's just that Fergus flirted with Maeve. You still hold a grudge? Cuculin suddenly laughed. Chapter 353. Because Wu Ming used to work for Maeve, he was on the side of Connaught. After the war with Ulster, he ran over and said that he wanted to work for Maeve. Because of Fergus' frivolous words, Wu Ming threw him out. Of course, the process took a lot of effort. After all, Maeve was someone that Wu Ming recognized as his sister. Even if Maeve wanted to fall in love and get married, Wu Ming would never allow an old rogue like Fergus to come. Not to mention that Maeve did not have such thoughts. Maeve, who was obsessed with Wu Ming, did not get married until she died. Instead, she played with men and let them die one by one under her pomegranate skirt. Moreover, they died before they could take advantage of her. Of course, Wu Ming also contributed to this. As a warrior who protected his sister's chastity, Wu Ming naturally shot those who wanted to use force. You said that you didn't want to marry Maeve, and you didn't let her find another man. You even made our 2 countries go to war. I really don't know what you were thinking. Cuculin complained about Wu Ming helplessly. She was already throwing herself at you. Why didn't you want her? It's fine if you don't want her. Don't get in the way of others. Don't get us involved. Back then, for some reasons, Wu Ming had been protecting Maeve. But after all, Wu Ming was a traveler and had no plans to stay in any place. Then, in order to prevent Wu Ming from leaving, Maeve started the war between Connaught and Ulster. I don't have a choice either. Wu Ming rubbed his forehead. Forget it, forget it. Let's not talk about this. It's all in the past anyway. Cuculin, who hated Maeve, began to change the topic. With the identity of an enemy established, they have an advantage in launching a general attack on us, Wu Ming said. How did you escape? Wu Ming asked Cuculin. Cuculin was not the kind of guy who would throw his life away even if he knew that he could not win. Come to think of it, it seemed to be true, cough cough. Speaking of which, Fergus wouldn't say, I'm going to use my noble phantasm, and so on to let Cuculin escape. Fergus must have judged that Cuculin could not escape, so he released his noble phantasm. Logically speaking, Cuculin should have left. However, Cuculin, who was covered in wounds, smiled. Don't underestimate the Lune Rune, brother. Cuculin smiled. Even so, Cuculin was seriously injured. As the prototype of the holy sword, the demon sword, I was careless. Wu Ming smiled. The Lune Rune was something that the Norse main god, Odin, had sacrificed an eye in exchange for. How could it be weak? Wu Ming had never used the Lune Rune in battle, so he had neglected the power of the Lune Rune. You are the first disciple of the master. If the master knew, you would be finished. Cuculin laughed at Wu Ming. You'd better behave yourself. Who knows when you'll disappear, Wu Ming said. He disappeared in an instant and appeared in front of Cuculin. Once again, he gave Cuculin an elbow strike. Pfft! I said I was injured. Cuculin rubbed his wound again and complained loudly. So, do you need to make a contract with this master? Wu Ming said, pointing to Gadotsi. After Cuculin's explanation, his master disappeared in an instant, leaving nothing behind. Wu Ming guessed that the other black followers were the same. Although the black followers in Winterwood City had lost their master, because of the mutation of the Holy Grail, the black followers without a master could still ensure that they would not be sent back to the Hall of Valhalla through the connection of the Holy Grail. But Fergus's magic sword was not so easy to block, and Cuculin barely survived by relying on the power of the Lune Rune. Hey! Gadotsi saw Wu Ming pointing at her, and she was a little overwhelmed. That, if Mr. Cuculin is willing. Gadotsi said shyly. Oh, it's a young master. Of course I am willing. Cuculin was instantly excited when he saw that his master was a young girl. Boom. It was the sound of a huge object falling to the ground. Mr. Cuculin, please respect yourself. Matthew stood beside Gadotsi, slammed his huge shield to the ground, and then looked at Cuchulain seriously. Fortunately, Matthew did not use too much strength, or the floor would have to be changed again. Wu Ming thought. Yes, I am very honest, Cuchulain said. Wait a minute. Olga Marie walked in front of Wu Ming and Cuchulain. What's the matter with you two? Olga Marie roared. Olga Marie's understanding of Cuchulain had been refreshing since he came in. After all, the conversation between Cuchulain and Wu Ming was very clear. Your real identity is a warrior of Connaught, the silver dragon Sira, who is as famous as Cuchulain. Olga Marie looked at Wu Ming's eyes. Sira? Gadotsi looked at Matthew in confusion. That senior, it's like this. Matthew took Gadotsi's hand, quietly went to the side, and told Gadotsi about Sira in history. Oh, senior brother, you haven't told them your real name yet. Cuchulain, who was sitting on the side, said gloatingly. After all, I'm not Sira now, just a man-killer fiend. Wu Ming helplessly spread out his hands. Assassin. Jack, is your real name Jack the Ripper? After hearing Wu Ming's words, Olga Marie guessed Wu Ming's real name. Fog, London, black clothes and hat. Being able to call himself Jack, a pair of female noble phantoms, Olga Marie judged our real name from all this information. Man-killer fiend? Are you kidding me? How could you be a man-killer fiend? Cuchulain frowned and asked in confusion. Wu Ming's senior brother, a great hero, turned into a man-killer fiend, which really damaged his image. Well, this is for the vengeful spirits of those children. I replaced them and became Jack the Ripper. Wu Ming smiled indifferently. Replaced the vengeful spirits, became Jack the Ripper. Olga Marie carefully thought about Wu Ming's words, savoring the meaning. However, Cuchulain didn't understand at once. So that's how it is, as expected of you. It seems that you have experienced a lot in the future. Through Wu Ming's words, Cuchulain immediately guessed why his senior brother became Assassin Jack the Ripper. It was nothing more than absorbing Jack the Ripper's spiritual base, freeing the vengeful spirits that were originally trapped, and becoming Jack the Ripper himself. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Then Wu Ming looked at Olga Marie. Sorry, master. At first I wanted to hide my real name, but later I realized that you might not like this identity, so I always wanted to hide it. What an idiot. Olga Marie said softly. Olga Marie raised her head and looked into Wu Ming's eyes. You listen to me. You are my follower. No matter what, I won't mind. Looking at Olga Marie's determined eyes, Wu Ming smiled. What a frank Olga is not bad. Chapter 354. Then, Wu Ming was scolded by the arrogant Olga Marie again. Wu Ming didn't care, after all, he was arrogant. Later, Cuchulain and Gadotsi concluded a servant contract. Originally, Cuchulain wanted to conclude a temporary servant contract, but because it was not conducive to physical recovery, Wu Ming forcibly changed Cuchulain's mind and concluded a formal contract with Gadotsi. My body has gradually begun to recover. I didn't expect the little girl to have such excellent qualifications as a master. Cuchulain felt his physical condition and couldn't help but look at Gadotsi. Of course, this was not a flirtatious look, but a surprise at Gadotsi's potential as a master. Don't underestimate Tachika, she has excellent master qualifications. Patting Cuchulain on the shoulder, Wu Ming smiled. Olga Marie was a little jealous at this time. After all, her master contract with Wu Ming was a half-finished product that Wu Ming cheated. However, I still want to be my master. Wu Ming, who noticed Olga Marie's expression, continued. This made Olga Marie blush again, and Olga Marie glared at Wu Ming angrily. However, Olga Marie looked very much like an angry kitten. That the food is getting cold, let's eat first. In order to avoid embarrassment, Matthew took the lead in changing the topic. Gadotsi and Matthew had already finished cooking and brought the food to the table. Now they could enjoy it directly. Suddenly, Gudazi let out a loud cry. By the way, Mr. Assassin, there is one more thing I have to trouble you with. Although Cuchulain's previous recklessness made everyone know Wu Ming's other identity, the Connaught Silver Dragon Wu Ming still asked everyone to call him Assassin or Jack. After all, he now came with this identity. Is there anything else, Tachika? Wu Ming asked gently, which made Gadotsi blush. After all, Wu-ming was really handsome in a black leather jacket and a black top hat. Can you tell Matthew's real name? Or her noble phantasm's real name is fine. Gudatsi knew that her request was a bit difficult, but she still put her hands together and begged Wu-ming. Tachika, didn't I say, as long as you become stronger? What? Noble phantasm is an instinct. Olga Marie was about to say something, but Cuculin instantly interrupted her. Marie suppressed her anger. She looked at Cuculin's eyes, and didn't say anything. Instinct? Mashu pondered over Cuculin's words. Ah yes, it's instinct. Cuculin spread out his hands. Servant and noble phantasm. These two exist together, and are not separated from each other. If you haven't been able to release your noble phantasm, it's probably because your instinct hasn't been activated. With that, Cuculin looked at Gudatsi, revealing a dangerous look, and at the same time, emitting a murderous aura. Gudatsi was a little puzzled, but Matthew and Olga Marie instantly understood what Cuculin meant. Mashu quickly raised her shield and stood in front of Gudatsi, while Olga Marie looked at Cuculin with a scrutinizing look. Tachika is now your master. Don't think about doing anything dangerous. After all, even if Cuculin was someone Wu-ming knew, there was no guarantee that he wouldn't do something to hurt them. After all, Olga Marie was a magician, so it was normal for her to have such thoughts. Okay, Cuculin, don't tease them anymore, Wu-ming said. Well, I'm just livening up the atmosphere. Cuculin smiled and waved his hand, dispelling the murderous aura. Then, I'll leave the noble phantasm and the real name to you. I'm going to rest, brother. After saying goodbye to Wu-ming, Cuculin's spiritual form disappeared. Wu-ming shook his head helplessly at Cuculin's character. Don't mind him, he's just like that, Wu-ming said to Gudatsi and the others. Immediately, Matthew also put down his shield and retreated to Gudatsi's side. So, can you let Matthew use his noble phantasm? Olga Marie asked, sitting on the sofa with her arms crossed in front of her chest and her legs crossed. Let's not talk about this in a hurry. Let me ask you, Matthew. Did the servant who lent you his power tell you his real name? Wu-ming looked at Matthew. No. Matthew was stunned, then shook his head. Really? What was the servant who gave you power thinking? He didn't even tell you his real name and noble phantasm. It's really a headache. Olga Marie covered her head. Generally speaking, a servant's noble phantasm was related to their own life experience. Matthew didn't know the real name of the noble phantasm, so it was normal that he didn't know what the servant was. Wu-ming smiled, then Wu-ming continued to ask. So when you saw Berserker Lancelot, did you have any reaction? Although Matthew didn't understand Wu-ming's intention, he still thought about it. When I saw him, I didn't feel anything, but when I knew he was Lancelot, the Knight of the Lake, I was a little angry. Matthew, why are you angry? Gudatsi was a little puzzled. I don't know. Wu-ming shook his head. So, you mean that the heroic spirit who gave Matthew power has a special relationship with Lancelot? Olga Marie was a first-class magician, and she immediately guessed Wu-ming's intention. That's right. Wu-ming nodded. The reason why he asked Matthew this question was because Wu-ming knew the real name of the servant who gave Matthew power from the beginning. The most noble of the Knights of the Round Table, the Knight of the Holy Grail, Galahad, the Knight of the Holy Grail. That was the real name of the servant who gave Matthew power. For a long time, Matthew had addressed Wu-ming and Gudatsi as seniors, but he didn't use the term senior to address others. He addressed Gudatsi as a senior because the two of them formed a bond in Chaldea, and others addressed Wu-ming as senior by Matthew, meaning that Wu-ming was senior Wu-ming. But in fact, Galahad was the only one who addressed Wu-ming as senior back in Camelot. Because Lancelot admired Wu-ming the most, he told his son Galahad to be particularly polite to Wu-ming, but Wu-ming didn't like the word lord, so Galahad addressed Wu-ming as senior. Although that was one of the reasons, Wu-ming recognized that the power Matthew used was Galahad's because of the shield. The shield was basically the same as the shield that Artoria held during the Round Table Conference, but the details and size were different. Even Bedivere couldn't bear the burden of the Round Table. Only Galahad could. The purest and noblest knight of the Holy Grail, Galahad, only he could bear the burden of the Round Table. The servant who gave you the power to survive from the brink of death, and gave you the power to protect Tachika is named Galahad. Chapter 355. Galahad. Matthew put one hand on his chest and whispered the name softly. Thank you, Assassin Senpai. Matthew bowed to Wuming happily to express his gratitude. You don't have to thank me, Matthew. Even without me, you would have known Galahad's real name sooner or later. Wuming smiled and shook his head. Then Wuming gave Matthew a doji. And don't be happy too early. Although I know Galahad's real name, I don't know the real name of his noble phantasm. Why? Gadatsi was puzzled. After all, noble phantasms are obtained after becoming a heroic spirit. Although there are many physical weapons and noble phantasms, most of them are obtained after becoming a heroic spirit. Wuming looked at Gadatsi and explained to her. For example, the noble phantasms of Cuchulain, Fergus, and the others were with them when they were alive. Generally speaking, this kind of noble phantasm was the name of the weapon itself, so knowing the name of the weapon would mean knowing the real name of the noble phantasm. However, there were many noble phantasms that had never been seen before in history. The most classic example was the treasured artifact that betrayed the witch Demetrius, Rule Breaker Talisman, Rule Breaker. It was the embodiment of the traitor witch's life, just like her entire life. The Rule Breaker Talisman was also full of betrayal. Although the noble phantasm itself was not as powerful as the knife, it had the ability to nullify all magic. It could completely nullify contracts based on magic, or life forms born with magic. Needless to say, this kind of noble phantasm was much more powerful than the Gay Balg, which was a weapon with a physical body. Galahad's noble phantasm appeared after becoming a heroic spirit, so I don't know. Wuming finished his explanation. Aren't you special? How can you not see through the noble phantasm of a servant? Olga Marie looked at Wuming with some dissatisfaction. Then I'm really sorry. I don't know about this kind of relic that only exists after it has been upgraded. Wuming shrugged indifferently. That's a pity. Gadatsi said regretfully. It's okay, senpai. At least I already know that the servant who gave me power, and my benefactor is Galahad. Matthew comforted Gadatsi with a smile on his face. Well, you're right. I've already completed half of it. When I become stronger in the future, I'll be able to find out about Galahad's noble phantasm. Gadatsi said excitedly. At this moment, Olga Marie looked at Wuming. You can't get Matthew to use the relic? Wuming smiled at Olga Marie's question. I didn't say that I couldn't let Matthew use the relic. I just didn't know the real name of the relic. But how can you use the relic without knowing its real name? Gadatsi was completely confused. She tilted her head and looked at Wuming with Matthew. Olga Marie, on the other hand, was frowning. Even she couldn't figure out how to use the relic without knowing its real name. Looking at the puzzled crowd, Wuming began to explain about the relic. After the death of various characters, according to their life experience, they were upgraded and also obtained a trump card called the relic. The relic is the trump card of every hero. And to release this trump card, you need to call out the real name of the relic. This is indeed the case. Wuming finished, sat on the sofa and poured himself a cup of tea. Speaking of which, Gilgamesh's tea was not ordinary. It had been so long, but the tea was still warm. Go on. Olga Marie said impatiently. Okay, don't worry. Wuming took a sip and put the teacup down. The so-called name of the relic is actually just a form. Cuchulain also said that the relic is an instinct. Is there a limit to your instinct? If that's the case, it's not an instinct. Wuming spread out his hands. Now for Matthew, what he lacks is not only the real name of the relic, but also the recognition of the relic. Only then can he unleash the power of this table shield. Wuming almost said the table, but fortunately he changed his words in time. What did you say in the end? Gadatsi seemed to have heard something different, but she didn't hear it clearly. Ahem. Don't worry about the details. At present, we need to give Matthew's shield a real name. This time, it will be easier to release it when needed. Wuming quickly changed the topic. Then, how about Assassin give Matthew a real name for the relic? Gadatsi suggested. This shouldn't be done by me, but by you guys from Chaldea. Wuming said, looking at Gadotsi, Matthew and Olga Marie. Is it up to us? Gadotsi thought, but she didn't have a clue. Naming something, Gadotsi inexplicably felt that the world was full of malice. Then, when Mashu releases her noble phantasm, how about shouting Lord Chaldeas? Olga Marie suddenly said from the side. Lord Calds. Matthew carefully thought about the real name of the relic. Well, thank you, Director. Matthew sincerely looked at Olga Marie and thanked her. Olga Marie looked at Matthew's sincere smile and was a little stunned. No, it's nothing. Then Olga Marie said softly. Without a doubt, Olga Marie was proud again. Great. Matthew. Then you can release the relic. Gadotsi hugged Matthew and said happily. But don't be happy too early. At this moment, Wu Ming retorted. After all, if you can't be recognized by the relic and release the relic, then the so-called Lord Chaldeas is a joke. Wu Ming looked at Matthew and Gadotsi seriously. Assassin is right. If Matthew can't release the relic, then the real name I gave you will be wasted. You have to work hard. Olga Marie encouraged. Yes, I will work hard. Matthew nodded excitedly. You too, Tachika Fujimaru. As a master, your self-awareness is really bad. I will train you later. Olga Marie said to Gadotsi sternly. It can't be? Gadotsi's face was filled with worry. For this girl who was just an ordinary person not long ago, special training was like running a few kilometers in military training. Don't talk nonsense. Hurry up and eat. After eating we will train. Olga Marie pinched Gadotsi's cheek and urged. Senior, you have to work hard. Matthew cheered her on. Yes. Gadotsi said helplessly. Wu Ming looked at Matthew's figure and couldn't help but think of the pure young man Galahad. Maybe you didn't tell her your real name to train her. But with me here, your idea may not work. Galahad, well, I will help you train her. Wu Ming looked out of the window. Although the sky was dark, the future was full of hope. Chapter 356. After dinner, Gadotsi was dragged by Olga Marie for special training. It was called special training, but in fact, it was Olga Marie telling Gadotsi about magicians, servants and masters. After all, even if Gadotsi stepped into the world of magicians, she was still a girl. Becoming a master meant that he might die, and Olga Marie's task was to make Gadotsi recognize all of this. She didn't want him to disappoint Mashu and be a qualified master. While Olga Marie was doing special training for Gadotsi, Wu Ming was also doing special training for Matthew. In the yard, Wu Ming and Matthew were fighting against each other. Mashu put her shield on the side of her body and was ready to fight. Wu Ming, on the other hand, wielded a silver-white longsword. That's right, it was the meteor silver. It was reasonable to say that Wu Ming's assassin class wouldn't have weapons of other classes, but Wu Ming cheated by bringing his noble phantom's dragonist with him. Although this class couldn't release the meteor silver, it could still be used for hand-to-hand combat. As a shielder, you must have a defense that can resist all attacks. That shield is already very strong, so you have to start with the person holding it, Wu Ming said carefully. Matthew listened carefully to Wu Ming's words, nodding his little head from time to time. Next, I will attack your shield. You only have one goal, and that is to hold on under my attack. Wu Ming held the meteor silver and put it in front of him and said, Next, I will attack your shield. You only have one goal, and that is to hold on under my attack. Are you ready, Matthew? Wu Ming said sternly to Matthew. Yes. Senpai, I am ready. After saying that, Mashu placed her shield in front of her and looked at Wu Ming from the corner of her eyes. Let's go. After that, Wu Ming rushed toward Matthew. Clank. The holy sword and the holy shield collided, making a very harsh sound. Matthew blocked the attack and made a muffled sound. You can't do it, Matthew. You have to know that my strength is only C-class. You have to adapt to this impact, or your master will die. Wu Ming criticized Matthew. Yes. Senpai. Matthew responded loudly. Again. After that, Wu Ming hit Matthew's shield again. Clank, clank, clank. Silent continued to attack Mashu's shield, and there was a burst of harsh sound. Matthew struggled to support himself and took Wuming's blow after blow, making muffled sounds again and again. Matthew's legs couldn't stop shaking, and his hands couldn't stop shaking, but Matthew didn't let the shield leave his hands. Drops of sweat slid down Matthew's cheeks and fell to the ground, but Matthew was still holding on. Wuming looked at Matthew with relief. Gudatsi was really lucky to have such a follower in Junior. Gradually, Wuming's sword swung faster and faster. Matthew, who could still rest between swings, gradually had no chance to catch his breath. Clank, 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 clank. Gradually, the meteor silver in Wuming's hand turned into a silver-white sword light and bombarded Matthew's shield. If one looked closely, they would find that each sword light was enchanted with magic. This was an alternative version of magic discharge. Although Wuming didn't have this skill, because of Wuming's EX-level infinite magic, Wuming could extract the magic from his body and enchant it on the meteor silver. This was another advantage of Wuming. Because Wuming was not dead and had a powerful identity, Wuming had the memory of his class. For example, Cuculin as a caster should only have knowledge about the Lune rune and not the spear art. However, his spear art was engraved in his bones, so even as a caster, Cuculin could still fight a few rounds with Wuming. Moreover, for example, Stheno and Euriley, the two of them didn't have corresponding classes at all. Because of the performance of their class, the two of them were given the ability of that class. For example, Wuming was now an assassin, so Jack the Ripper couldn't use magic. Therefore, Wuming couldn't use the magic in his mind. He could only inject magic into the runestone to detonate it. Similarly, Wuming couldn't use the meteor silver noble phantasm, because Jack the Ripper didn't have any records of using the meteor silver noble phantasm. This was also the disadvantage of being a servant. It would fix the development direction of a certain class. Once a servant was summoned in a certain class, the most convenient weapon to use would be the weapon of that class. For example, if Euriley was an archer, she would have an extra bow in her hand and would have knowledge about bows and arrows. At this moment, Matthew was enduring the high-density slashes that were infused with magic. However, although Matthew looked like he couldn't hold on any longer, Matthew was still able to hold on. Matthew, Gudatsi, who had arrived at some point, looked at Matthew, who was struggling and couldn't bear to look at him. She then turned her head away. Don't turn your head away. Olga Marie stood beside Gudatsi and stared at Wuming and Matthew in the courtyard. She said to Gudatsi, "Did you forget what I told you? Watch them carefully." After Olga Marie finished speaking, Gudatsi seemed to have made up her mind. She clenched her fist and looked at Matthew, who was struggling to hold on. Wuming, of course, noticed Gudatsi and Olga Marie's arrival. Therefore, Wuming gave Matthew another dose of medicine. "What's wrong, Matthew? Can't you do it? Your master is watching you." Hearing Wuming's words, Matthew turned his head and looked to the side. Sure enough, Gudatsi was looking at Matthew intently. Matthew read something from Gudatsi's eyes. "Hold on, Matthew. I believe in you." Matthew read the sincere encouragement in Gudatsi's eyes. "If I were an enemy, then I would completely defeat you and kill your master." This sentence was the last straw that broke the camel's back. Matthew's eyes suddenly shrank, as if he thought of the scene that Wuming said. He was defeated, and Gudatsi was cruelly killed. "No, Senior." "Ah!" In an instant, Matthew roared. The magic all over his body condensed on the shield. Matthew shook the shield violently, and a white light began to appear. A strong white wall gradually emerged. Lord Chaldeas. Chapter 357. With the release of the noble phantasm, the chalk wall appeared in front of Matthew. Bang! Wuming attacked the chalk wall, but he was bounced back. The meteor silver was inserted into the ground, and Wuming stepped on the ground to maintain his balance. The meteor silver and Wuming's legs were pushed back by the huge force, leaving 3 deep marks on the ground. "I see. Is this Galahad's noble phantasm?" "No, it should be Matthew's noble phantasm, the pure land of Chaldea in your heart." Wuming pulled out the meteor silver and looked at the chalk wall that was as pure as Matthew's heart. Then Wuming put away the meteor silver. "Well done, Matthew." Wuming gestured to Matthew and gave him a thumbs up. "That's great. Matthew looked at Wuming's thumbs and said weakly. Matthew looked at Matthew's thumbs up. Then Mashu looked at Gadatsi, who was running toward her, and her vision turned black, and she fainted. Wuming instantly appeared behind Matthew and hugged the unconscious Matthew. Gadatsi ran over and looked at Matthew worriedly. You did well, Matthew. I'm proud of you. Gadatsi held the unconscious Matthew's hand and said with a smile. Really, your training is too cruel. Olga Marie walked to Wuming and looked at the unconscious Matthew and complained to Wuming. But Matthew persevered and released the noble phantasm, didn't he? Wuming looked at Matthew with relief. At least her efforts were not in vain. And now there's a strong enemy. Matthew has to do this if he wants to grow up quickly. Then Wuming took out a runestone from his black ripples. The lune rune on it represented healing. Placing it on Matthew, Wuming injected magic into the runestone. The runestone broke, and the pure green energy turned into light spots and merged into Matthew's body. Visible to the naked eye, Matthew's body disappeared, and even his cheeks had a trace of peace, as if he had a good dream. Athena told me that warriors can only grow in battle, but Matthew is a defensive type, so I used this method to train him. Athena? Are you hiding something from us? Olga Marie crossed her arms and stared at Wuming suspiciously. Silence was in Ireland, and would not have anything to do with Greece. Therefore Olga Marie looked at Wuming suspiciously. Ahem. I'll send Matthew back to his room first. Tachika, please take care of Matthew. Wuming quickly changed the topic, and then carried Matthew in his arms. As for the shield, it was naturally carried by its master. Oh, okay. Gadatsi nodded and picked up the shield. Why is it so heavy? I thought it was light. Gadatsi's face was red as she carried the shield. Usually, Matthew could carry it easily, but she didn't expect the shield to be so heavy. Matthew is a servant. Even if he is a sub-servant, he is still a servant. Of course, his strength is higher than yours. Come on, Tachika, this is also part of training. Wuming looked at Gadatsi with a smile, and then left first. Wait a minute. Gadatsi carried the shield, struggled to follow Wuming, and left. Really, both of them are so troublesome. Olga Marie rubbed her forehead. How many things is he hiding from me? Then, Olga Marie began to think about Wuming's secrets. Exploring a man's secrets is the first step for a woman to fall. Suddenly, Cuculin materialized. None of your business. Olga Marie proudly stared at Cuculin. Although Cuculin was rejected, he didn't get angry or retreat. Then Cuculin moved forward and stared at Olga Marie as if he saw something interesting. The talent of a magician is first class, but he doesn't have the talent to become a master. That's interesting. It's none of your business. Olga Marie angrily pushed away Olga Marie, who was staring at her. Cuculin, who was pushed away, didn't get angry. He smiled casually, and then began to talk about Wuming. By the way, my brother is really resourceful. He can even make a contract with someone who doesn't have the talent to become a master. Cuculin waved his hand and said casually. That. At this time, Olga Marie suddenly opened her mouth. Huh. Cuculin looked at Olga Marie in confusion. Are you close to assassin? Olga Marie asked with a slightly red face. It was a little embarrassing for a proud person to put down her attitude and ask someone else. Cuculin's eyes lit up. He had already guessed Olga Marie's thoughts. Not very close. After all, the first time we met was on the battlefield. But I heard a lot about my brother from my master. We also talk about him in our free time. After all, we are not mortal enemies. We fight all the time. If Wuming heard this, he would have hammered Cuculin's head. If Cuculin hadn't been serious, Wuming wouldn't have fought him to the death. Did you think that the spear of impaling death was so easy to receive? Besides, isn't there a saying that the one who knows you best is often your opponent? So, I know my brother quite well. Cuculin looked at Olga Marie and grinned. What? Do you want to know my brother's privacy? Cuculin teased Olga Marie. Olga Marie's face turned red when she heard Cuculin's teasing. Ahem. After all, he is my follower. It is necessary for me to know my follower's story, isn't it? Olga Marie coughed and replied righteously. Isn't there a record in human history? In fact, the stories of our heroes are basically similar to what is recorded. Cuculin waved his hand. Instantly, Olga Marie looked at Cuculin with a "you're dead" look. First of all, I only know my brother's story in Ireland. Cuculin raised his hands in surrender. That's fine. Let's get started. Olga Marie thought for a moment. It was better than nothing, so she nodded. Then Olga Marie came to the steps and sat down, waiting for Cuculin's story. Then, Cuculin looked in the direction of Wuming. After confirming that there was no Wuming around, he began to tell the story. His story is basically similar to what you know, but I have to tell you about him and Maeve. As if he thought of something, Cuculin smiled gloatingly. In the beginning, my brother was a traveler. However, he said that he was traveling around, but in fact he just couldn't find his way. Cuculin laughed. You mean he has no sense of direction? Olga Marie also wanted to laugh. Ah yes, but he was a greenhorn. Now he shouldn't have a sense of direction. Cuculin smiled and shook his head. After that, the first place he went was Connaught, and because he accidentally saved a damsel in distress, he was entangled by Maeve. Chapter 358. In the end, Maeve's father intervened in the battle, and my brother took the opportunity to leave. After that, I never saw him again. Cuculin, who had been leaning against the wall for a long time, stopped. The story was over. Maeve really didn't get married for assassin? Olga Marie found it hard to imagine that Maeve, who was called a slut, would keep her virginity for a man. Yes, after all, Maeve was captured by Wuming as soon as she left home. Therefore, although Maeve seemed to be dissolute in the days after that, as far as I know, she has been keeping her chastity. Cuculin looked helpless. But even if senior brother were to follow Maeve, the war would still happen. There's no difference, Cuculin said in an open-minded tone. After all, Maeve was called a person with a bad character by my master. Cuculin waved his hand. Olga Marie, on the other hand, had a thoughtful look on her face as she held her chin with one hand. So that's how it is. Anyway, don't get too involved with my senior. At this time, Cuculin's tone began to become serious. The iron rule of servants is that they can't interfere too much in this era. If the girl's heart is locked onto the servant, it won't be good for either of them. Cuculin was saying that they shouldn't rely on Wuming too much. Once the Holy Grail War is over, Wuming will leave here, and whether he can be summoned again is still a question. If it's just a one-sided love, it's okay, but if both of them have a deep sense of dependence on each other, it's really bad for both of them. It's like a common love between a god and a mortal. And in the end, it won't end well. Because not to mention the lifespan of the two, they're not on the same level. I'll think about it. After a moment of silence, Olga Marie answered. What a wonderful story just now. Suddenly, Wuming's ghostly voice came from behind Cuculin. Ah! Cuculin let out a strange cry and quickly distanced himself from us. However, a hand pulled Cuculin's collar. Yo, senior, what a coincidence. Cuculin pretended to be fine. I didn't expect you to be able to tell stories. No wonder you're a caster, Cuculin. Wuming smiled and looked at Cuculin. It's okay. Cuculin smiled awkwardly. After all, no matter what, he was still talking about her behind her back, so it was a little awkward. Pay attention to the situation around you. Don't let the enemy servants take advantage of you. Wuming let go of Cuculin after saying that. Understood. Cuculin waved his hand at us, and his spirit form disappeared. After Cuculin disappeared, Wuming looked at Olga Marie. At that moment Olga Marie had turned away, blushing. Didn't Cuculin say that it's not good to know too much about a man? Wuming didn't get angry, but said in a calm tone. What can I do? You're always so mysterious. It's right for me to want to know more about you. Olga Marie replied, not to be outdone, but her voice was a little weak. Olga Marie still didn't turn around, but from the way Olga Marie's ears turned red, her face must be as red as a monkey's but at that moment. However, the fate that we have formed together will not be broken. Wuming said inexplicably. Olga Marie looked at Wuming in confusion. Wuming smiled and continued. My mission is to save this world, and your mission is to solve this singularity, isn't it? Since our goals are the same, then we are companions. Companions will definitely be able to understand each other in the future, so there's no need to rush. Companions? Olga Marie carefully thought about Wu Ming's words. But you will leave after this, won't you? How can we understand each other then? Olga Marie looked at Wu Ming. Yes, it wasn't that Wu Ming didn't have a chance. It was that Olga Marie didn't have a chance. Olga Marie's words reminded Wu Ming of the fact that Olga Marie herself was a ghost. As if he had decided on something, Wu Ming walked behind Olga Marie, turned his back, and sat down next to Olga Marie. Ah! Olga Marie felt the warmth on Wu Ming's back and screamed. What do you care? Wu Ming smiled without turning his head. Oh no, I was just startled, said Olga Marie indifferently. Wu Ming shook his head helplessly. The once reliable director was now like a little girl. In that case, let's get to know each other first, my master. Wu Ming suggested in a light tone. Olga Marie was silent. Wu Ming didn't say anything either, just quietly waiting for Olga Marie to speak. You know, because of my identity, I've never had any friends since I was a child, and my only teacher died in an accident. Olga Marie spoke. Although it's not a good time to complain, we still think that Olga Marie didn't have any friends because she was arrogant. After that, I threw everything I had into magic. Fortunately, my talent was there, and I became a first-class magician, and the next head of the Animus family. Olga Marie leaned on Wu Ming's back and continued. 3 years ago, my father, one of the 12 monarchs of the clock tower, the monarch of the astrology department, died. Olga Marie was a little sad. I became the new monarch of the astrology department, and then, in order to inherit my father's will, I became the new director of Chaldea. But you know, the world of magicians is cruel. Olga Marie's eyes were a little dim. The other magician families began to target me, the young monarch, and the people in the family began to gradually disapprove of me. And in Chaldea, I was very busy because of all kinds of things. Olga Marie painfully held her head. Her body was a little stiff. Then I met Leviticus at this point. Wu Ming could feel that Olga Marie's stiff body relaxed. Whether it was the family's disdain, the other family's suppression, or the various troubles in Chaldea, as long as Lev was there, he could help me solve them. Chapter 359. You are one of the 12 sovereigns, the director of Chaldea. Although Lev is no longer here, you still have Tachika and Matthew, and they all care about you. Although Roman seems to be quite frivolous, I believe that he is still reliable. Wu Ming said without looking back. Perhaps this was the so-called true love is revealed in adversity. Now there were less than 20 people left in Chaldea. These people could continue to operate Chaldea and support Gadatsi, Matthew, and Olga Marie's singularity exploration, not only because of their good character, strong will, but also because they cared about the 3 people. If they choose to give up when most of Chaldea's facilities are damaged and almost all the staff members are dead, then can you still solve the singularity smoothly? Wu Ming proposed. Let's not talk about other things first. Take the space travel technology, the collar transfer, for example. Without the help of Roman and the others, you can't return to Chaldea. Olga Marie was a little confused. She had never thought about these problems. Roman and the others' backup support, in Olga Marie's view, was reasonable. She didn't consider whether the remaining 20 people in Chaldea would go on strike. They care about you and believe that you will be able to solve this singularity. How about you? How should you shoulder the responsibility of a director? Do you have hope in your heart, or do you have despair in your heart? Wu Ming's series of questions made Olga Marie a little sluggish, and she couldn't respond for a while. Besides, don't you still have me? I am your servant. Don't forget that I am a cheating servant, so what's wrong with finding a cheating master? Wu Ming said frivolously. So it's just Leviticus. You still have all of us. If we all disappear, I can understand that you're devastated. But if you're devastated because of Lev's disappearance, then you're really sorry for all of us who care about you. Listening to Wu Ming's words and feeling the warmth of Wu Ming's back, Olga Marie calmed down. At this moment, Olga Marie seemed to be out of the shadow caused by Lev's death. That's right, I'm really embarrassed like this. Olga Marie smiled, and it was a smile without the slightest arrogance. That's why, It's better to be frank like this. Wu Ming suddenly turned his head and looked at Olga Marie's smiling face and said. Seeing that Wu Ming was going to tease her again, Olga Marie was angry again. How dare you say Lev? You're a mere servant. Now, Olga and Marie were no longer in a state of confusion over Rafe's affairs. Mama, don't pay attention to the details. Wu Ming smiled and stood up. Since there's nothing else, I'll leave first. I still have to find Gilgamesh. After all, she's not a good child who would go home on her own. Wu Ming said as he prepared to leave. Wait a minute. I have already told you about me. What about you? Olga Marie seriously stared at Wu Ming, as if to say, don't even think about running away. What do you mean by telling you about yourself? In the end, I'm the one who comforted you. You arrogant master. Wu Ming teased Olga Marie, making Olga Marie furious again. Assassin, anyway, we still have a long way to go. I'll leave it to you to slowly discover my things. That's it, see you later. Wu Ming smiled at Olga Marie. After saying that, Wu Ming's spirit body disappeared. Still have a long way to go. That's right. Olga Marie smiled and happily returned to the house. However, she didn't know that she was already dead. However, Wu Ming won't let this fact come true. The cheating servant has already thought of a way to let her cheating master live. The next morning, everyone in the villa was basically in a state of deep sleep. Even several servants were resting, maintaining their spirit bodies. Ha! Cuculin yawned, which was the product of boredom. Really? Why do I have to keep watch at night? I've already set up the alarm. The servants also need to rest. Cuculin protested. Because Cuculin spoke nonsense to Olga Marie, Wu Ming specially punished Cuculin to keep watch at night in a state of non-spirit body. However, Cuculin completely protested. Because of this, Wu Ming specially played a game of rock-paper-scissors with Cuculin. The result was naturally Wu Ming's victory. Later, after Cuculin began to keep watch at night, Wu Ming left the villa. Looking at the time, senior brother should be back soon. Cuculin said to himself, bored. When Wu Ming went out, he said that regardless of whether he achieved his goal or not, Wu Ming would come back in the morning. At this time, a runestone next to Cuculin suddenly burned. This phenomenon was the alarm device set by Cuculin in the distance of the villa was triggered. Wu Ming's return naturally wouldn't trigger the alarm trap, and it was basically impossible for there to be any living people in this city, so the person who triggered the trap could only be one person. A servant. Cuculin frowned. Accompanied by the golden particles, Stheno and Euryale appeared in front of Cuculin. Is it an enemy? Stheno asked. Although Stheno and the other servants were resting in spirit body, they could still detect if something happened. Ah yes, and it's an old acquaintance. Through the runestone set up by Cuculin over there, Cuculin saw the enemy's face. Where's Lancer? Is she still asleep? Cuculin livened up the atmosphere and teased. Sister is accompanying her master. After all, her master is still a cute child. Euryale smiled and licked her lips. It felt like she was going to eat Sakura Madu. Let's not talk about that for now. He's heading this way. His target is indeed here. Cuculin looked at the burning marks on the runestone and judged the enemy's movements. So, are you ready? I can't provide combat power. Stheno said. Of course. You just need to be responsible for waking up the masters now. Cuculin said confidently. Stheno and Euryale looked at each other, then nodded and disappeared in spirit body again. Then, let me see if you can defend against my attack, Fergus. Chapter 360. Not far from Wu Ming's villa, on the edge of a collapsed house, there was a half-naked man carrying a huge spiral sword. Really, such an intact house, isn't it obvious that I'm here? Fergus shook his head with some boredom. Basically, in the current Winterwood city, there were no intact houses. If they didn't turn into ruins, they would be burning. The better ones were only able to maintain the basic structure of the house, with only a small part of it collapsing. The small shop that Wu Ming and Olgamai found was like that. The small shop was located in a remote corner, and the fire basically didn't reach it. But these houses in Winterwood City had one thing in common, that was, they were all dilapidated. And Wu Ming's small villa, because of Gilgamesh's protection. The villa was beautiful and intact. The house looked like a high-rise bungalow, incomparably obvious. Maybe it's the residence of a servant. Let's go and take a look, Fergus said as he walked toward the villa. After taking a few steps, Fergus clearly felt traces of magic around him. Boom! Fergus raised his sword and blasted it toward a house that had been turned into ruins somewhere around him. The ruins were blown away in an instant, and it was completely destroyed. At the same time, the traces of magic also disappeared. Detection? Could it be Cuchulainn? Fergus thought. Although it was impossible for Cuchulainn to survive his noble phantasm, there were exceptions to everything. As Cuchulainn's adoptive father and friend, Fergus naturally wouldn't underestimate Cuchulainn. Cuchulainn did have the ability to survive this magic sword. This is my negligence. If it's Cuchulainn, he can indeed survive. Fergus showed a man's smile. Since that's the case, then let's fight again. Fergus sped up as he spoke. However, Fergus didn't notice that the rune of Rune had already started to burn on the path he had to pass through. Cuchulainn, who was far away in the villa's courtyard, closed his eyes and felt the arrival of Fergus, then smiled. I'm a caster, Fergus. After that, Cuchulainn moved his finger. Boom! Around Fergus' position, intense flames erupted and rushed into the sky. The sound of the explosion resounded through the clouds. What? Is the enemy's servant attacking us? Godatsi's bracelet shouted in panic as he rushed over. Calm down, Doctor. The enemy is not coming, Matthew said calmly. Is that so? It's never wrong to be a little more careful. Roman laughed awkwardly as he tried to salvage the situation. However, this only made things even more awkward. Busy. Then Roman's image appeared beside Godatsi. Is this Cuchulainn, the son of Light of Ireland? Roman asked as he looked at Cuchulainn, whose eyes were closed. Regarding the current situation, as well as various information, Mushu had already reported to Chaldea, so Roman also knew about Cuchulainn. What's with the sound of a soft-footed shrimp? Cuchulainn opened his eyes and looked at Roman. Soft-footed prawn. Roman turned around in disappointment, looking like he couldn't take it anymore. Pull yourself together, Roman. Romeo. Olga Marie scolded Roman. Ahaha. Doctor, you have to be strong. Godatsi comforted Roman somewhat weakly. Then, Godatsi looked at the explosion in the distance that had almost stopped. Is that your noble phantasm, Cuchulainn? It's really spectacular. Matthew thought for a moment and denied Godatsi's words. It shouldn't be, senpai. For a noble phantasm, its power is a bit too weak. Although Matthew's noble phantasm was also very weak, in Matthew's opinion, the noble phantasm of the Son of Light of Ireland should not be like his own. Matthew is right. This is just a magic explosion caused by me using the magic workshop to connect to the ley lines. It's not a noble phantasm. Cuchulainn nodded and confirmed Matthew's conclusion. When Cuchulainn came to the villa, Wuming asked Cuchulainn to build a magic workshop around the area. Once a magician built a magic workshop, he was no longer a candidate for the weakest servant, but a candidate for the strongest servant. So that means, at this time, Roman had recovered. He turned around and looked at everyone seriously. The enemy hasn't left yet. Olga Marie said calmly, crossing her arms over her chest. That's right, the enemy servant did not leave. With that, Cuchulainn closed his eyes again and slammed his staff on the ground. The enemy is the warrior of the Red Branch Knights, Fergus MacRoy. Be prepared for the enemy's attack. Fergus MacRoy, the magic sword user? It's really a headache. Olga Marie frowned. Now that assassin has not come back, and the two goddesses can't fight. At present, we only have caster Cuchulainn, lancer Anna and shielder Matthew. The enemy is Fergus, the magic sword user, which is very unfavorable for us. Listening to Olga Marie's analysis, Matthew, Godatsi, and Roman on the screen all looked at Olga Marie strangely. It feels like, leader, the enemy is different from before. Godatsi said slowly. Well, it seems to be more confident and more majestic. Matthew also nodded, indicating that he agreed with Godatsi's statement. Hey, leader, what happened to you? Roman asked directly. No. You will be the temporary administrator of Chaldea for me. Don't ask so much. Then Roman was scolded by Olga Marie. Poor doctor. Gadotsi and Matthew looked sympathetically at Roman, who had a "I was wrong, please forgive me" look. Matthew protect Tachika. Roman, you assist Cuculin to detect the surrounding magical situation. I'll go find Anna. Olga Marie ordered. Yes. Leader. At this time, Anna's voice came. No, I'm already here. A soft and delicate voice came from behind everyone. Anna was wearing a large hooded cloak and holding a scythe. Miss Anna, where is Miss Sakura Madu? Matthew asked with concern. I asked my sisters to take care of her. Anna answered concisely. That's right, they can only take care of the little girl since they can't fight. Olga Marie nodded. After all, the two of them were the enemy's servants. If they were suddenly controlled by the command curse, it would be troublesome. Therefore, the restraint of the heavenly lock was still necessary. Detected a high-density magical reaction in front of us. Speculated to be a noble artifact. Roman's voice suddenly came. What? Everyone didn't expect the opponent to use a noble artifact as soon as he came. And the opponent's movement speed was too fast. Ha ha ha. Take this move of mine. Cuculin. Calidbalg. Chapter 361. Calidbalg Neon Sword. A rainbow-colored beam of light came from a short distance away. Everything that was shrouded by the rainbow-colored beam of light turned into ashes. Like a surging wave, the rainbow-colored beam of light rushed towards them, and soon arrived in front of Cuculin and the others. Matthew! Gadotsi shouted quickly. Yes. Clang! Matthew stuck his 2-meter-tall shield into the ground. Lord Chaldea's simulating the beginning of humanity. The air seemed to vibrate and made a buzzing sound. White lines appeared and formed the shape of a brick. Then, the brick appeared and became solid. A holy chalk wall appeared in front of everyone. Boom! The rainbow-colored beam of light hit the chalk wall and made a loud noise. Matthew struggled to support his shield, and the tall chalk wall was faintly falling. Fergus's noble phantasm was an A++ grade noble phantasm. Matthew had just been able to release his noble phantasm yesterday, so it was still a little difficult for him to fight against the neon sword. At this moment, Cuculin waved his staff. At this moment, countless lune runes appeared around the villa, including the ground inside the villa. Countless lune runes turned into pure magic and attached to the chalk wall in front of Matthew. The chalk wall became unusually strong and resisted Fergus's noble phantasm, the neon sword. Soon, the rainbow-colored beam of light disappeared, and Matthew successfully resisted the neon sword. These runes that I set up just in case have come in handy. Cuculin grinned. Thank you very much, Mr. Cuculin. Matthew took a short break. Soha held his shield and thanked Cuculin. Don't be in a hurry to thank me. The enemy is coming. Cuculin's expression became serious. Oh, this is the warrior who resisted my noble phantasm. I didn't expect it to be a delicate girl. A hearty voice came from where Cuculin was looking. Matthew and the others began to get ready. A burly man walked over. The 3 deep scratches on his chest were quite conspicuous. Although it was within my expectations that the relic would be blocked, I didn't expect it to be such a beautiful girl. Fergus said heartily as he looked at Matthew with praise. However, Matthew felt that Fergus's eyes were full of aggression. Although I expected you to find this place, your speed is beyond my expectations, Cuculin said to Fergus. Well, we have a good caster on our side. His brain is more flexible than yours. Fergus laughed. Cuculin and Olga Marie secretly noted this down. This was another piece of valuable information. Then, let's end the feeling. This way, I can rest. This trip to the modern world was really boring. Fergus raised his magic sword once again. Is he going to release his noble phantasm again? Olga Marie was surprised. The magic consumption of the A++ level noble phantasm was quite large, but Fergus was able to release 2 noble phantasms in less than a minute. It was amazing. After all, I have a master who is like a cheat. Fergus's spiral sword began to condense a colorful light. Then, I'll do it again. Matthew dragged his tired body and was ready to release his noble phantasm again. However, Cuchulain smiled. Then you have to hurry up, Fergus. That's why he's back. As soon as Cuchulain's voice fell, countless swords, spears, swords, and halberds suddenly bombarded Fergus. These were all noble phantasms. Boom, boom, boom. Countless noble phantasms caused violent explosions. The wind blew so hard that Olga Marie and Gadotsi couldn't open their eyes. Master! Matthew quickly stood in front of Gadotsi, blocking the hurricane for her. Behind Olga Marie, a figure appeared and supported her. So you're back. Olga Marie felt relieved when she felt the broad shoulders behind her. At present, if one were to talk about the backbone of this small team, it would be none other than Wu Ming. And I've brought a surprise, Master, Wu Ming said with a smile. Countless noble phantasms stopped shooting, and the explosions also stopped. Wu Ming waved his hand, and a wind attribute Lune Rune stone appeared, blowing away all the smoke and dust caused by the explosions, revealing Fergus, who was in the center of the explosion. Even if it was Fergus, under the noble phantasm's attack, his neon sword's noble phantasm would have been interrupted. Fergus was also injured by the noble phantasm and the explosion. Fergus knelt on the ground with one knee, supporting himself with his magic sword. Oh, I see. You guys found her. Fergus seemed to know who made the noble phantasm attack just now, and said with a clear conscience. Mongrel bastard. Last time you escaped. This time, this king won't be careless. Gilgamesh's figure appeared on the broken street lamp. Gilgamesh, who had left the villa alone, was finally found by Wu Ming. Gilgamesh was wearing a rather revealing golden armor. He crossed his arms in front of his chest and looked at the embarrassed Fergus with anger in his eyes. Yo, did you rope Archer in? Cuchulain came to us and said with surprise. As the existence who set up the magic workshop, Cuchulain said that when Fergus released the first neon sword, he noticed that Gilgamesh, Wu Ming, was approaching. Thus, Cuchulain didn't rush to deal with Fergus. Instead, he chatted with him to pass the time. However, Wu Ming shook his head. Archer is one of my people. There's no need to talk about roping him in. When he said this, not only Cuchulain, but also Olga Marie were surprised. Listening to Wu Ming's words, it didn't seem like a simple alliance. Olga Marie thought carefully. Well, it's fine as long as he's one of us. Cuchulain waved his hand and didn't ask anything. After all, it was useless to know that Gilgamesh was one of them. Olga Marie looked at Gilgamesh and Wu Ming with a guessing gaze. Let Fergus leave, Gil. Then Wu Ming said to Gilgamesh. Annoying, of course I know. Gilgamesh refuted Wu Ming, and then stretched out his hand. A few golden ripples appeared around Fergus, and a few silver chains instantly tied up Fergus, who was injured and didn't manage to dodge. It seems that I'll have to stop here. Although Gilgamesh's Enkidu only had a special attack on enemies with divinity, for a servant like Fergus with high strength, he could still break free. However, Gilgamesh used Enkidu's Enkidu to deal with Fergus, and only needed a moment to bind him. Poochie. Chapter 362. A few high-level relics appeared from the golden ripples, and pierced through Fergus, who was bound by Enkidu. Fergus's body began to glow. It was a sign that the hero spirit was about to leave the stage. Well, I don't expect to be able to escape a second time after meeting you. Although Fergus was about to leave, he still smiled calmly. This is the price you have to pay for daring to recklessly size up this prince. As he spoke, Gilgamesh moved his arm again. Golden ripples appeared and a high-level relic appeared, cutting Fergus in half. In an instant, Fergus' corpse turned into blue mana particles and disappeared with the wind. At this point, Red Saber Fergus McRoy exited. Then Gilgamesh looked at Gadotsi and the rest who were next to Wu Ming. Is this your new partner? Yenryong, you're so useless. Gilgamesh looked at Gadotsi and the rest and laughed. Olga Marie looked at Wu Ming in surprise. It was a different way of addressing him. Although you're weak, your courage to look directly at this king is commendable. Gilgamesh stopped laughing and praised Gadotsi and the rest. Alright, get ready. We're going to Winterwood City's Big Hollow, Wu Ming said. Soon the courtyard of the villa was cleared. As Fergus's neon sword covered a large area, part of the villa was destroyed. The courtyard was filled with broken stones. After all, Matthew had just been able to release his relic not long ago. He could not completely protect the villa. His relic could only protect Gadotsi and the rest. Therefore the villa, including the roof, was basically destroyed. In the courtyard, Gilgamesh sat on his exclusive seat. He closed his eyes and crossed his arms as he waited. Gadotsi and the rest looked serious. They looked at Wuming and waited for Wuming to speak. Roman turned on the remote screen, which was rare. The screen appeared next to Gadotsi. However, when Roman appeared, Gilgamesh looked at Roman differently. Stheno and Urieli brought Sakura Madu out of the room. As soon as Tonging came out, she ran into Anna's arms and hugged him tightly. It seemed like the neon sword had scared the little girl. Now there are only 4 enemies left, Wuming said. Apart from King Arthur, the Black Saber, we've also confirmed the identities of the Red Rider and Red Lancer. The Red Rider is the king of the Kingdom of Macedon. He's known as the Conquering King, and Alexander the Great. His name is Iskandar Alexander. That king, huh? Roman pondered. Gilgamesh, on the other hand, snorted in displeasure. This gave Roman a fright. To Gilgamesh, there was only one king in the world, and that was his hero king, Gilgamesh. Ignoring Gilgamesh's snort, Wuming continued. The identity of the Red Lancer has also been confirmed. He's the great hero of India, Karna. This statement caused everyone to exclaim in surprise. Although they were prepared for this, they still found it hard to believe. After all, Karna was too powerful. But you can rest assured that with Gil here, you can rest assured. Wuming comforted everyone. As if responding to Wuming's words, Gilgamesh opened his eyes and glanced at everyone with his red pupils. That great hero will be handed over to this king. Just watch. Gilgamesh said domineeringly. He's really reliable, ahaha. Gadotsi laughed. The identity of the Red Caster is still unknown. He was too cautious and did not reveal his real name. Not to mention the noble phantasm, he basically did not reveal anything. He has been following the Red Rider like an ordinary person. Wuming frowned. Well, I'll deal with the caster first. Gil will deal with Karna. Anna and Cuchulainn will deal with the Conquering King. Wuming began to assign tasks. Understood. Cuchulainn replied, and Anna just nodded. This king can easily deal with Karna. Gilgamesh said proudly. You have the capital to be proud, but I don't want to clean up the mess for you in the end. Wuming said flatly. This king knows. Although he was still proud, he was frank this time. Then, Wuming looked at Cuchulainn and Anna. Iskandar is a high-level heroic spirit. You have to be careful. Don't worry, if we can, we will make him leave. If we can't, we will just hold him back. Cuchulainn said with a smile. Wuming saw that Anna did not move and Cuchulainn smiled and nodded helplessly. I hope it will go well. Wuming always felt that Iskandar was not so easy to deal with. The other party was a king with the title of Conquering King. That. Master Assassin, what about us? At this time, Matthew raised his small hand and asked like a good student. Gadotsi also looked at Wuming playfully. Assassin, you didn't forget about us, did you? How could that be? I gave you the most important task. Wuming said with a smile. Could it be? Olga Marie had almost guessed it, the only enemy that no one dealt with. Black Saber, King Arthur, that is your opponent. As if following Olga Marie's words, Wuming directly revealed the mystery. Hey. Matthew and Gadotsi shouted. They never thought that the one they had to deal with was the ultimate boss, King Arthur. Have confidence in yourself, Matthew, Tachika. Wuming advised the two. You have the shield of reason. It's just a holy sword, you can definitely defend against it. But. Matthew was still a little worried. No matter what, sending an immature follower was too rash. When he thought of the power he used was the power of King Arthur's knight, Galahad, Matthew was a little worried. Using the power of a subordinate to fight against a loyal superior, Matthew inevitably felt a little uncomfortable. I remember that there is a story that compares who is stronger between a shield and a spear. Then this time, let's compare who is stronger between a holy sword and a holy shield. Wu-ming walked to Matthew's side and patted Matthew's little head. This attracted the attention of Olga Marie and Gilgamesh. Li Xiang is here too. Don't be discouraged just because the enemy is King Arthur. You have to protect your master. Matthew looked at Gadotsi, then looked at Wu-ming and nodded confidently. Yes, I understand, senpai. Then I will follow Matthew and Tachika. Olga Marie suddenly said. You don't need my help, do you? Olga Marie looked at Wu-ming. Of course, as your follower, I am very strong. Wu-ming nodded. It was a wise choice to let Olga Marie follow Matthew and Gadotsi. The reliable Olga Marie could take care of the nervous too. Gilgamesh looked at Olga Marie critically, then shook his head disinterestedly and said nothing. Stheno and Euryale, you two will be responsible for protecting Sakura Madu. Even if most of your power is sealed by Enkidu, you can still protect a little girl. Wu-ming looked at Stheno and Euryale. Of course. Leave it to me. The two answered affirmatively. Then, Wu-ming glanced at everyone. In short, the enemy may gather in the big hole in Winterwood City based on our movements. What we need to do is to defeat them, repair the singularity, and save the world. Everyone do your best. Oh. Chapter 363. Everyone began to move towards the Yuanzhong mountain. However, civilians should just walk on the ground. Gilgamesh said proudly and took out Vamona from his gate of Babylon. Accompanied by a loud roar, Gilgamesh left angrily. Why would he be angry? So Gilgamesh invited Wu-ming to go to Vamona together, but Wu-ming refused. So Gilgamesh left angrily. You really dare? Hero King's eyes are burning with fire. Cuchulain said beside Wu-ming. Gadotsi and the others all nodded frantically. Just now, everyone could see Gilgamesh's anger. After all, I'm going with Gilgamesh. What if you get into trouble? Wu-ming was right. Although Wu-ming seemed to have 7 servants, they didn't have much combat power. Stheno and Euryale, because they were bound by Wu-ming's fake Enkidu, they couldn't fight. Matthew and Anna, both of them were immature servants. One was a sub-servant that had just been given power, and the other was a young servant that was summoned in an immature state. Their attribute values were not strong. They could be regarded as average. Although the two of them had great potential, it was just potential. It was the same as having an attribute value of D++. Although they were only D class, they could burst out 3 times the power at a critical moment, and they could instantly surpass a class. But that was only for a moment, and they were only D class under normal circumstances, so it couldn't be counted as strength. As for Cuchulain, Cuchulain was summoned as a caster. He wasn't weak, but the general ability value of a caster servant was very low. Once they encountered a surprise attack, the chances of them surviving were not high. Now, only Gilgamesh and Wu-ming could serve as trump cards. Gilgamesh had the Gate of Babylon, which contained countless treasures. Moreover, he had the guile-parting sword Ea, which gave him an invincible battle strength. However, your frontal combat ability is not strong. You can ambush the enemy, but you are not suitable to deal with the enemy's surprise attack. Olga Marie naturally understood this principle and analyzed it. She believed that Wu-ming also understood this principle. Although Wu-ming was strong, it was summoned as an assassin. Its attributes were more inclined towards assassination and detection, and its relic was targeted at females. Its skills were only for an assassin, so it could not be called a trump card. Therefore, Wu-ming could follow Gilgamesh and leave first. However, Wu-ming rejected Gilgamesh's proposal. I naturally have a way. Wu-ming smiled and remained mysterious. Let's not talk about this first. In the current situation, I think it is wiser for us to go together. Cuchulain also expressed his own opinion. Well, that's it. Wu-ming smiled and said nothing. He continued to move forward. Gadotsi and others followed. Olga Marie was helpless for a while, and then followed the large group. By the way, why do you know so much? Olga Marie asked. Everyone could understand that Olga Marie was asking about the enemy servant's intelligence. When he heard Olga Marie's question, Wu-ming thought of what happened last night. Wu-ming went out to look for Gilgamesh and accidentally met a few servants. They were the red-haired Red Rider and the unusually cautious Red Caster, who dressed like an ordinary person. When he was exchanging information with everyone, there was one thing that Wu Ming didn't mention. Even if Wu Ming had seen Castor's appearance before, Wu Ming once looked for Gem Man Zelik and saw a young man beside him. It was said that he was Emilo II, the current monarch of modern magic. However, Wu Ming was sure that the person was not Emilo II. According to Wu Ming's speculation, it was likely that he was relying on something else. After that, it seemed that Castor's noble phantasm exposed Wu Ming's whereabouts. In order to avoid trouble, Wu Ming quickly left. After all, the main task was to find Gilgamesh, not to fight with the enemy. Ryder and Castor didn't chase after him, so Wu Ming left safely. Later, it seemed that Gilgamesh also sensed Wu Ming's aura, so he drove Wu Ming to Wu Ming's side. After all, Wu Ming was now Gilgamesh's master, so they could naturally sense each other when they were not far away. After finding Gilgamesh, Wu Ming didn't rush to take Gilgamesh back to the villa. Instead, he found a roof and asked Gilgamesh if he knew any information about the enemy. So Wu Ming knew the identity of Iskandar and Karna, but he didn't know the true identity of Castor. The real names of Iskandar, Karna, and Darius III were told to Wu Ming by Gilgamesh. According to Gilgamesh, Iskandar reported his name at the beginning, and he also reported the real name of Darius III. It had to be said that Iskandar's king's demeanor was quite heroic. Since Winterwood City was suddenly burned by a fire, Gilgamesh left the villa. On the surface, he said that he came out to have fun, but in fact, Gilgamesh was worried about Wu Ming's situation, so he went out to find Wu Ming. After sensing that the contract between Wu Ming and himself was still there, plus Gilgamesh was instigated by some people, as a result, Gilgamesh kept fighting with several servants. Wu Ming observed several small explosions on the tall building, many of which were caused by Gilgamesh, and Gilgamesh treated Fergus cruelly because Fergus flirted with Gilgamesh, and as a result, he was chased by Gilgamesh. Because this is the information that Gil collected during this time, plus the information that I collected. She caused a lot of trouble outside. Wu Ming smiled. Then what do you have to deal with the incoming enemies? Olga Marie continued to ask. Wu Ming stopped, turned his head, and looked at everyone. This. Gudatsi and the others looked at Wu Ming attentively. It's a secret. Wu Ming smiled mischievously. Gudatsi and the others almost fell to the ground. You bastard. Olga Marie angrily clenched her fists and looked at Wu Ming. Ha ha ha. As expected of senior brother. Cuculin also laughed. On the contrary, the three Gorgon sisters didn't care about this from the beginning, and they didn't feel disappointed or tricked. Just in time, the enemy is coming, senior brother, show us. Although Cuculin said jokingly, his expression became serious. Boom. Moo. Accompanied by the roar of thunder and the roar of the sacred bull, a chariot pulled by two bulls flew from the sky. Chapter 364. Alalalab, Conqueror King Iskandar is here. The driver of the war chariot was a muscular man with short red hair and red pupils. He was dressed in an ancient armor and a red cloak, and he shouted loudly, "Oh, Gorgon's goddess is here? Well, it looks like you have been captured, ahahaha." Sure enough, the conqueror King Alexander the Great. Iskandar's king's temperament was really heroic. Everyone couldn't help but think of the word heroic in their hearts. Forget it, do as you wish. On the chariot, the man with long hair and modern clothes next to Iskandar said indifferently, "Oh, Kongming, I still think that telling us our names is what heroes should do, ha ha ha." Iskandar's bearded face that was connected to his hair laughed and patted the shoulder of the young man called Kongming. Well, that guy exposed Castor's real name again. Wu Ming's guess was right. This was not Ermero II, but a servant who came through Ermero II's body. So, this cautious servant is the resourceful military counselor, Zhuge Kongming. Cuculin nodded. No wonder he is so cautious, even Assassin didn't find out his real name. Matthew praised. Ah yes, after all, he is known for his caution. Zhuge Ming is cautious all his life. This sentence was not said for nothing. Well, Zhuge Kongming rubbed his eyebrows with a headache. Didn't we agree not to reveal my real name, Conqueror King? Zhuge Kongming said with some distress. Ha ha ha, What does it matter? Everyone here is a hero who is about to face King Arthur. It is the final moment. There is no need to hide your real name. Iskandar laughed unconsciously and patted Zhuge Kongming's body again. Forget it. Zhuge Kongming dodged Iskandar's arm and looked at the others. That's right. My real name is Zhuge Kongming. I'm a sinner who failed to restore the Han dynasty. There's no point in remembering it. Zhuge Kongming said indifferently. Then Zhuge Kongming looked at Wu Ming. Do you recognize this body of mine? I'll say this in advance. I didn't erase his consciousness. Instead, I let his consciousness sleep within my body. After all, there's a huge problem with this Holy Grail war, Zhuge Kongming explained. Generally speaking, the servant who descended through dependence had the ability to erase the consciousness of the body. However, Zhuge Kongming didn't do that. Instead, he chose to put his body's consciousness to sleep and act on his behalf. This was similar to Matthew. Matthew's power was Galahad's departure, leaving the power for Matthew to use. On the other hand, Zhuge Kongming put the consciousness of the human body to sleep and let him, an outsider, take over. In addition, the servant who descended through dependence could also choose to integrate with the consciousness of the body. There were very few servants who would choose to erase the consciousness of the human body. Basically, if they weren't evil people, they wouldn't choose to erase the consciousness of the human body. I understand the general situation. Are you going to hinder us? Wu Ming asked. Ha ha ha, how is that possible? I'm here to ask for your help. Iskandar laughed and said something that surprised everyone. After all, we belong to the human side. The guy who summoned us is obviously standing on the opposite side of the human. Zhuge Kongming explained. Zhuge Kongming said, and Iskandar stopped his chariot on the ground. Let's not talk about helping us first. Isn't your master that man? Wu Ming asked as he looked at the two chariots that landed on the ground. Yes, you're right. We are indeed that man's servants. Iskandar admitted generously. I know what you're worried about. If we work together with you, it's hard to guarantee that our master won't attack you at a critical moment. That was why Wu Ming put the heavenly lock on Stheno and Euryale. But don't worry. My noble phantasm can suppress such a situation. Iskandar laughed. My noble phantasm is an area of effect formation. Not only can it weaken the enemy, but it can also resist the master's command. Unless more than 3 command curses are activated at the same time, it won't work, Zhuge Kongming explained. Wu Ming looked at Stheno and Euryale. That way, the two of them would be able to fight as well. The man in the green hat placed a command curse on each of our 7 servants from the beginning. So as long as we're within the range of Kongming's noble phantasm, his command curse will lose its effect. Ahahaha, you're indeed a wise strategist. You're extraordinary. Iskandar laughed again and patted Zhuge Kongming's shoulder. However, Iskandar did not notice that Zhuge Kongming was about to lose it. The man in the green hat has been with Saber all this time, and he doesn't show any signs of leaving. So I've hidden my noble phantasm in the big hole in Winterwood City. You just have to activate it when the time comes, Zhuge Kongming explained. I see. Wu Ming looked at his companions and nodded. Well then, I wish us a pleasant cooperation. Wu Ming said with a smile and extended his hand. Pleasant cooperation. Zhuge Kongming also extended his hand and shook hands with Iskandar. By the way, do you guys want to be my subordinates? Iskandar looked at Wu Ming and the others with joy. Sigh. Matthew and Gadotsi were stunned. Olga Marie shook her head disinterestedly. Stheno, Euryale, and Medusa shook their heads without even thinking about it. Sorry, I don't want to be someone's subordinate. I want to be free. Besides, I already have a master. Cuchulain grinned and pointed at Gadotsi behind him. How about you, assassin? Your assassination skills are superb. I didn't even notice you. However, you don't look like a villain, so I welcome you to join my army. Iskandar saw that everyone rejected him and looked at Wu Ming, who had yet to speak. Wu Ming smiled at Iskandar's words. I've taught many kings. You don't need me to teach you. The one beside you is enough. Wu Ming's meaning was obvious. He chose to reject as well. I've said it before. With their personalities, they won't be your subordinates. Zhuge Kongming said calmly. Ha ha ha, you won't know if you don't try. What a pity. Iskandar saw that no one wanted to join his army. He was not embarrassed. Instead, he laughed happily. At this time, Wu Ming's words attracted Olga Marie's attention again. Even Matthew, Gadotsi, Anna, and even Kukulin looked at Wu Ming in surprise. Stheno and Uriali, who had already seen Wu Ming's identity through the goddess god core, were not surprised. Senior brother, you've been through a lot. But it seems like you're doing well, Kukulin praised. Well, I've been through a lot. However, I'll tell you about it when I have the chance. Wu Ming smiled at Gadotsi, Matthew, and Olga Marie's curious faces. Then Wu Ming walked forward. Now the most important thing is to end this. Chapter 365. With the addition of Iskandar and Zhuge Kongming, the pressure on Wu Ming and the rest was significantly reduced. Now the only enemies left were Artoria, Karna, and Leviticus. It was undoubtedly much easier. Then the two groups separated. Wu Ming and the rest were working together with Iskandar, but there was no need for the two groups to work together. In order to prevent us from being discovered, let's split up temporarily. When you reach the big hole, we'll come to support you. After that, Iskandar and Zhuge Kongming continued to carry out the mission of the command incantation, which was to kill all living creatures. However, in Winterwood City, the only living creatures were Wu Ming and the rest, as well as their servants. Therefore, the command incantation was not convincing at all. In addition, a long time had passed, so they knew that the command incantation's coercive power had basically disappeared. Naturally, Stheno and Uriali felt the same way. However, to be safe, Wu Ming did not let them come into contact with Enkidu. After all, there was nothing wrong with being cautious. While Iskandar and Zhuge Kongming were constantly destroying the destroyed houses, Wu Ming and the rest were heading toward Winterwood City in Yuanzhong Mountain. When they were almost at the foot of Yuanzhong Mountain, Wu Ming realized that something was wrong. The concentration of magic on Yuanzhong Mountain was a little high. Boom. At that moment, the sound of an explosion came from the mountain. Gilgamesh has encountered an enemy. Wu Ming took a step forward and headed toward the direction of the explosion. Pay attention to the surroundings. After that, Wu Ming disappeared. Near the top of Yuanzhong Mountain, two figures were moving rapidly. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Golden ripples constantly emerged from the back of the golden figure. Countless relics were shot out, and the target was the other golden figure. Bang bang bang. However, the golden red figure's martial arts skills were extraordinary. The strange long spear in his hand was constantly waving, knocking away the treasures one after another. Damn it! You bastard! How dare you shoot down this king's mount? As he spoke, Gilgamesh kept activating the Gate of Babylon, and countless relics were shot at the spearman again. The order I received is to kill anyone who dares to go up the mountain. Your Vimana is also a forbidden item, Gilgamesh. The spearman said Gilgamesh's real name. Then you shall receive the king's wrath. Karna. That was right. The one who was fighting with Gilgamesh was Karna, the hero of India. Karna was originally ordered to go to Winterwood City to kill all living creatures, but there were basically no living creatures others as followers. It was at that time that Karna discovered Gilgamesh, who was hanging out outside. He's is not a servant. Karna had Karna sneak attack Karna to S2s. Although Gilgamesh was quite arrogant, he did have the right to be arrogant. Under the attack of Karna's Brahma, curse me, Brahma, Kundala, Gilgamesh successfully released a shield from his treasury before the attack arrived, and blocked Karna's throwing relics. Then the two of them began to fight. However, Karna seemed to have received some kind of message, and he abandoned the battle and fled. Gilgamesh did not chase after Karna, saying that he was a bastard who ran away. Just now, when Gilgamesh drove the Vimana to the top of the Yuanzhong Mountain, suddenly another Brahma, curse me Brahma, curse me, spear pierced through the Vimana, and the Vimana disappeared in the starlight. On the other hand, Gilgamesh, who was sitting on the Vimana, was incomparably furious. How dare a bastard shoot down this king's ride? This king will make you regret your blindness. Therefore, the two of them began to fight. The two of them were able to recognize each other because their respective characteristics were somewhat similar, and Wuming and Lev had also told Gilgamesh and Karna about the enemy's characteristics. In addition, the two of them were not very far from each other, so naturally, they knew each other's identities. Come on, Hero King Gilgamesh. Although he was surprised that the Hero King, Gilgamesh, was a woman at first, Karna did not underestimate Gilgamesh. After a series of actions, Karna could see that Gilgamesh was a powerful king. Then hundreds and even thousands of golden ripples appeared, surrounding Karna and Gilgamesh. Then hundreds and thousands of relics slowly emerged from the golden ripples. You should be satisfied to be bombarded by so many relics, Karna. Gilgamesh mocked Karna. Karna did not speak. Instead, he carefully looked at the weapons and relics. According to Karna's analysis, the only weapons that could pose a threat to him were divine weapons and weapons with the special ability to ignore defense. After all, Karna's golden armor could weaken all damage, and he knew 1/10 of it was a divine artifact armor. It was said that the armor given by the sun god, Surya, condensed light itself. It was said that even people could not hurt Karna at all. If Karna had enough mana, he could even keep his body unharmed. Lev, who had established a contract with the seven servants, naturally had enough mana. So Karna was now very strong. To be able to die under these hundreds and thousands of treasures, you should be satisfied. At this time, Gilgamesh was in a good mood. He smiled at Karna, who was trapped in the middle of countless golden ripples. Die. After that, the hundreds and thousands of relics all shot toward Karna from the golden ripples. At this time, Karna also moved. Boom, boom, boom. That was the sound of countless relics exploding when they hit Karna. Bang, 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 bang. The sound of hard objects colliding was constantly heard. That was the sound of Karna knocking away the relics. As for the treasures that were shot at Karna and touched him, they all exploded. The wind and flames from the explosion shone brightly on Karna, but Karna continued to selectively deflect some of the treasures away. Without exception, all the treasures that were sent flying by Karna were treasures that could restrain Karna's divinity armor. As for the treasures that attacked Karna's body, they couldn't even break through Karna's defense. It must be noted that Wuming defeated Karna last time, because Karna's golden armor had disintegrated. Taking advantage of that opportunity, Wuming injured Karna with his light cannon. Do you think it's that easy? Gilgamesh sneered. Pfft. Chapter 366. Puk Dash. Several noble artifacts pierced through Karna's body, and blood splattered everywhere. The noble artifacts that were inserted into Karna's body turned into spots of golden light, and were retrieved by Gilgamesh into the gate of Babylon. Cough. I see. You hid these noble artifacts in the shadows of other noble artifacts. As expected of the hero king. Karna coughed up blood and said with some shame, Gilgamesh was an archer after all. If he just threw noble artifacts around, it would be too degrading. Bastard, this is the price you pay for attacking this king, Gilgamesh said disdainfully. At this moment, a huge dark purple tentacle that looked like an octopus suddenly broke out of the ground. In an instant, Karna was tied up by this huge dark purple tentacle without any resistance, and was dragged into the hole in the ground created by the tentacle. Humph. At best, you're just a bastard, Gilgamesh said disdainfully and did not pursue. At this time, Wuming also arrived. Yenryong, you're late. You didn't see this king's moment of bravery, but seeing that you rushed over to support this king will not argue with you. Gilgamesh looked at Wuming and said arrogantly with squinted eyes. In the eyes of others, Gilgamesh was like a breeze, but at this time, Gilgamesh gave Wuming the feeling of a dog asking for praise from its owner. Yes, so your majesty, has the enemy left? Wuming said as he looked at the hole in the ground. Here, this is the hole. A rat-like tentacle took Karna away. Gilgamesh pointed at the hole in the ground and said disdainfully again. Tentacle? Wuming frowned. He had never heard of an enemy servant that could use tentacles. Thinking of this, Wuming squatted down and looked at the hole in the ground. There was a trace of mucus on the edge of the hole. At this time, Gadatsi and the others hurriedly ran up the mountain. Gudatsi and Sakura Madu were both held by their respective servants. Olga Marie's servant, Wuming, had already run up, so Kukulin was the one holding her. But, let go of me. Olga Marie said to Kukulin behind her with a red face. The reason Olga Marie became like this was because Kukulin lifted Olga Marie by her collar. It's really troublesome. Anna and Mashu have their own masters, and the two goddesses over there won't do such a rough job. I'm the only one left, and they won't let me hug them, so I can only do this. With that, Kukulin loosened his grip and Olga Marie fell to the ground. Of course she landed on her but first. Damn it. I'll remember you, Kukulin. Olgamai stood up and rubbed her buttocks, looking at Kukulin with shame and indignation. On the other hand, Kukulin looked indifferent. After all, he would return to the Martyr's Palace once the Holy Grail War was over. There was no point in looking for trouble. Something unexpected has happened, Wuming said when he saw that the commotion was almost over. Then, everyone looked at Wuming. Wuming then told them what had happened. Gilgamesh and Karna fought. Then a tentacle took away Karna, who didn't resist, leaving a hole covered in mucus. According to the information we have, the enemy doesn't have any servants with the ability to control tentacles. Olga Marie touched her chin and said, no matter if it's Karna or King Arthur, neither of them has such an ability, and the other servants have either left or are on our side. Wuming analyzed. In other words, Kukulin frowned. Is there a new servant? Gudatsi was surprised. Tachika is right. Judging from Karna's appearance, the man in the green hat must have summoned another servant. Wuming said solemnly, who the hell is that guy? He can summon an unlimited number of servants. What a troublesome enemy. Olga Marie said with a headache. Could it be the ability of the guy who pretended to be Professor Reef? Matthew raised his small hand and asked. That's right. The other party can provide 7 servants at once, and he has the purpose of destroying the world. It's very likely that he's not human. Gudatsi said excitedly as if she had discovered a new continent. It's not impossible, but I think it's more likely that the other party summoned another servant. Wuming didn't deny Gudatsi's theory, but proposed another possibility. Since the other party can provide 7 servants at once, then it's not impossible to summon another 7 or even more. Assassin is right. We have to prepare for the worst. Olga Marie also nodded. By the way, why did you believe the Red Rider and Red Caster so easily? Aren't you afraid that they lied to you? At this time, Olga Marie asked Wuming. It's not that I don't believe you. I just want to know what you were thinking at that time. Aren't you afraid that they lied to you? Olga Marie asked carefully. After all, they were in a situation where they would die if they made a wrong move. If the other party lied to them, they would be finished. At that time, Olga Marie wanted to ask, but because the other party was there, she didn't have the nerve to ask. After all, Olga Marie was a magician, and it was impossible for her not to be suspicious. I don't think Iskandar will lie. Wuming smiled, and then continued to move toward the entrance of the Yuanzong mountain. Huh? It's that simple? Olga Marie found it hard to believe. Just because they believed that the other party wouldn't lie, they cooperated so easily? I also feel that the king's temperament. I don't think he will lie to us. Matthew thought for a moment and said. Really, do you have a sixth sense? Olga Marie said helplessly. Okay, don't talk nonsense, let's go. Kukulin said, pushing Olga Marie. I know. Let go of me. So, everyone came to the Yuanzong Mountain's Ludong Temple. There was a large passage behind it that led directly to the inside of the big hollow. With the number of Wuming and the others, it was a bit inappropriate to take the previous small path. The whole Winterwood city turned into a field of fire, but the strange thing was that the temple was intact, and only some of the surrounding edges were broken. Let's go. Wuming said concisely. Just as everyone was about to enter the Ludong Temple, Wuming immediately held out his hand and stopped everyone. Both Kukulin and Wuming looked cautious. What's wrong? What happened? Gudatsi asked. Get ready, there's an enemy. Olga Marie gestured and prepared the magic bullets. Bang! Suddenly, the door of the Ludong temple was violently opened. Chapter 367. Bang! The door of Ludong temple was violently opened, but it wasn't an enemy that came out. Instead, it was an octopus-like monster that was as tall as a person with tentacles. In just a few seconds, countless sea monsters filled the Willow Cave Temple. They kept pouring out of the Willow Cave Temple's entrance and rushed towards Wu Ming and the others. Wah! What? What is this? It's disgusting. Gudatsi was shocked. There was no need to look closely. These monsters were covered in mucus, and the ground they passed through was wet. Olga Marie didn't say anything, but her legs were trembling. Sakura Madu shrank into Anna's arms in fear. Matthew was also afraid, but he still held on. He immediately raised his shield and stood in front of Gudatsi and Olga Marie. Only Gorgon's sister, Stheno, and the others weren't afraid of these things. These things look like sea monsters. Stheno looked at the tentacle monsters that were advancing and frowned in disgust. Although she wasn't afraid, she still felt disgust. Even the goddess hated these things. These things aren't worth this king's time. I'll leave them to you. With that, Gilgamesh's spiritual form disappeared. It seemed that she also hated these tentacles. Sure enough, these tentacles have a special attack on women. Wu Ming thought. Leave it to me, Anna said and handed Sakura Madu to her sister. Then, she rushed into the sea monsters with her scythe. No one objected. After all, Anna's scythe was more effective against these things that could infinitely regenerate as long as they had magic. The immortal slaughtering blade harp. This was the divine sword that had killed the demon Medusa. It could restrain some undying creatures and cause irrecoverable wounds to the opponent. For some inexplicable reason, this sword turned into a scythe and became Anna's weapon when she descended as a lancer. Swish, swish, swish. Just a casual slash was enough to kill a large number of sea monsters in front of him. The power of the undying slaughter blade harp completely killed these sea monsters that should have been able to regenerate. However, it was a little difficult for Anna to deal with the sea monsters that were still pouring out continuously by herself. Boom! A violent explosion came from beside Anna. The sea monster in front of Anna was blown to pieces. Anna turned around and looked behind her. Cuculin raised his staff, which was smoking like a gun shaft that had just been fired. Blow them to smithereens. I don't believe they can recover. Cuculin grinned. However, Anna was a little dissatisfied. Cleaning up these sea monsters was her mission. The enemy should have discovered us. Let's finish them off and leave as soon as possible. Wu Ming tried to persuade Anna. Then, Anna nodded with a frown on her face, but she still looked unhappy. Then I won't hold back, Cuculin said, laughing wantonly. The Lune rune in his hand kept drawing. Countless flames shot at the sea monsters, setting off a series of explosions. Boom, boom, boom. This series of explosions had killed almost 1/3 of the sea monsters. At this time, a few rune stones fell into the center of the remaining sea monsters, producing golden flames. Boom, boom. Then Cuculin looked at Wu Ming. The two of you should hurry up. Wu Ming smiled, then threw the Lune rune stone in his hand at the sea monsters again. Are we going to compete? I won't lose, Cuculin said excitedly, attacking the sea monsters frantically. In less than 5 minutes, the sea monsters that covered the sky disappeared, leaving behind a faint layer of black dust and traces of various elements. Ice, water, fire, wind, thunder, electricity, earth. Traces of almost all elements could be seen. This made Gudatsi and the others dumbfounded. Especially Olga Marie. That's a rune stone. How could an assassin have so many rune stones? Olga Marie complained crazily. Secrets that could not be known were fatal to Olga Marie. And assassin, where the hell did you get those rune stones from? Why do you have so many types of rune stones? Roman also complained. It's just my ability. Those rune stones were just made when I was bored. Wu Ming shrugged. However, assassin's damage output is really amazing. Matthew wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. After all, Matthew and the others had been watching from the side. Wu Ming's damage output was almost higher than Cuculin's. Cuculin's attack was just a simple red burst of flames, while their rune stones were all kinds of elements, so it was easy to distinguish. The reason why Matthew said this was because of the difference in their ranks. Cuculin was a caster, so it was normal for him to have AoE damage. After all, he was a mage cannon. However, Wuming was not a caster, but an assassin. As an assassin, he was even more AoE than a caster. It was simply outrageous. I've handed over almost all the offensive runestones I've made in the past. It's normal for them to have such an effect, Wuming said with a smile. He opened a part of the dragoness space in the center of his palm, and threw out a large number of rune stones from his noble phantasm. Because they were in a hurry, Wuming bombarded the sea monsters indiscriminately at a speed that even Mashu couldn't see clearly. Together with Cuculin, the two of them were able to destroy all the sea monsters that could affect the entire Fuyuki city in 5 minutes. There was another reason why Wuming used up all the rune stones. After all, they can be made in the future, can't they? These rune stones were made to deal with situations similar to this. Wuming smiled. At this time, Gilgamesh lifted his spirit form. As far as actors are concerned, these pieces of trash are not qualified at all, but they let me see a good show. Gilgamesh looked at the debris on the ground and said sarcastically, "If you could help me, it would be much easier." Wuming shrugged his shoulders. This king said that these things are not worthy of this king's help. Gilgamesh glared at Wuming fiercely. Yes, then let's go, the enemy is waiting for us, we can't lose the limelight. After dealing with Gilgamesh, Wuming said to everyone, "It seems that you are getting bolder and bolder, Hyenryong." Looking at Wuming and others who had walked away, Gilgamesh, who fell behind the crowd, said angrily. But then Gilgamesh's anger turned into joy, and he followed the crowd in his spirit form. Seeing your relationship with this king forgives your willfulness, Hyenryong. Thank you very much, king. Wuming smiled without turning his head. Soon Wuming and others left the Yuzong Mountain Ludong Temple, and came to the Yuzong Mountain Big Cave. Wuming, Gilgamesh, Cuculin, Matthew, Enna, Stheno, Uriali, Gadatsi, Olga Marie, Sakura, Madhu. 7 servants and 3 masters, the troops that caused the chaos of this era, arrived at the Demon King's castle. Chapter 368. Looking at the hole filled with magic, Gadatsi and the others couldn't help but tense up. Even Sakura Madhu felt the danger inside the big hole, and leaned into Anna's arms in fear. Welcome, welcome, welcome everyone. At this time, a voice came from the hole. After hearing this voice, Wuming instantly knew who it was. After all, the two of them had a deep hatred for each other. This voice is... Olga Marie was a little excited. Matthew and Gadatsi were also surprised. Even Roman, who turned off the virtual screen to make it easier for everyone to move, appeared again. Everyone looked at the shadow. A figure came out from the shadow of the hole, wearing a green top hat, green clothes, brown hair, and a gentle smile. Lev! Olga Marie shouted excitedly. That's right, it was Lev Lenor Floros. Lev, it's great that you're okay. Olga Marie was about to walk over, but she was stopped by Wuming and interrupted. Calm down, Olga, he came from the enemy's base. Olga Marie looked at Wuming and then looked at Leviticus. Although her eyes were still anxious, Olga Marie had calmed down and wouldn't defect to the enemy. After Wuming's persuasion, Olga Marie was now very calm. If it was the previous Olga Marie, she would have rushed over when she heard Lev's voice. Lev, are you still alive? At this time, Roman asked cautiously. It's Romani. I remember I should tell you to go to the control room immediately. Why didn't you listen to me? Although Lev still had a gentle face and tone, everyone could feel the anger in his words. Lev! Romani looked at Lev in disbelief. Now not only Roman but also Matthew and Gadatsi had seen that there was something wrong with Professor Leviticus. Lev, you're not a fake Lev, are you? Olga Marie asked. Leviticus' years of experience and habits made Olga Marie see that, as Wuming said, the other party was not a fake Leviticus. Yes, Olga, I am indeed Lev Lenor Floros. Lev smiled and looked at Olga Marie. By the way, you're also working hard, Olga. Lev said. It's okay, but I have a follower. Olga Marie smiled. She also saw that this Professor Lev was a little different from the previous Lev, but there was no doubt that this was the real Leviticus. However, Lev's words made Wuming's words. Later, as if confirming Wuming's guess, Lev said those words. You actually died a long time ago. Sure enough, Wuming frowned. Since Lev said to let Roman go to the control room, Wuming guessed that the explosion in the control room was Lev's doing. Now it seemed that he was right. After Lev finished speaking, Olga Marie was a little sluggish and made a puzzled sound. I'm dead, Olga Marie said with some disbelief. That's right, Olga. I put the bomb under your feet. I didn't expect you to still be alive. No, I should say that you're still alive in the state of a spirit. Lev explained to Olga Marie kindly. The bomb under my feet. Olga Marie's voice was a little trembling. Yes, Olga, now you can't go back to Chaldea, because your body is dead. There is only one result if you go back to Chaldea, that is, with the disappearance of your consciousness. In an instant, Lev's expression became terrible, and the corners of his mouth almost reached his ears. I am already dead, Olga Marie said with a desperate and trembling voice. Director Gudotsi, Matthew, and Roman were also affected by Lev's words, and looked at Olga Marie sadly. Pa. Suddenly, someone flicked Olga Marie's forehead. It hurts. Olga Marie covered her forehead, and looked at the guy who flicked her forehead with tears in her eyes. You lost hope because of the enemy's words? This is not what my master should be like. Wuming looked at Olga Marie's eyes and said helplessly, humans are a group of creatures with short lives and afraid of death. But because of this, humans will do something when they know that sooner or later they will die. Then, Wuming turned to look at Leviticus. Let's not talk about whether this guy is lying to you or not. If we can't restore this singularity, I'm afraid that not only Olga Marie, but also Tachika, Matthew, and even Roman will die. After Wuming said that, everyone realized. Yes, if the singularity couldn't be restored, humans would be completely wiped out in a year, and there was no difference between dying now and dying a year later. So even if it was for themselves, in order to save humans, they had to win. And didn't I say that I can lend you my shoulder at any time? I like you very much as a master. Wuming smiled. I'm sorry. Olga Marie apologized, and wiped the tears from her eyes. I am the director of Chaldea, the master of the famous clock tower Animusphia, one of the 12 monarchs, Olga Marie Asmaret Animusphia, the captain of the team who restored the singularity and saved humanity. How could I fall here? At this time, Olga Marie regained her confidence. Lev betrayed me, but I still have my followers, I still have people I can rely on, I will never fall. Seeing Olga Marie like this, Gudotsi and the others breathed a sigh of relief and smiled with relief. Sure enough, assassin, you are a scourge. Looking at Olga Marie who regained her courage, Lev looked at Wuming expressionlessly. Then I'm sorry, I especially like to scourge those villains, especially the fake gentleman wearing a green hat. With that, Wuming deliberately took off his black hat, and made a noble salute. Did you know? I was going to burn down this era and give the Holy Grail to Queen Arthur. I was going to leave this era, but who told me to meet you? Lev didn't care about Wuming's mockery, and continued speaking calmly. My idea is right, the last master of humanity can't do anything. The dead Olga Marie can't do anything, these tools' followers can't do anything. Then Lev showed a terrible expression. The most important thing is you. But in an instant Lev returned to his amiable appearance. But it doesn't matter, you're going to die anyway. I'll be merciful and forgive all the things that annoy me. You really dare to say that? Bastard! Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Poochie. Chapter 369. Four noble phantasms pierced through Lev's body. Gudotsi couldn't help but turn his head away. No matter what, they were acquaintances after all. He really couldn't bear to look at it. Oh, Hero King is still grumpy. Although Lev was pierced through by Gilgamesh's noble phantasms, he didn't die. Everyone looked, and saw Lev's body shaking slightly. This was obviously a projection. I've been in Chaldea for so many years. I can use this kind of projection. Roman and Olga Marie frowned. Lev then looked at Gilgamesh, who was expressionless. Ignoring the fact that assassin is here, Hero King Gilgamesh is considered one of the best tools. I wouldn't dare to come alone. Bastard. Gilgamesh glared. Lev's word tool obviously angered Gilgamesh. I think so too. With your kind, it's unlikely that you'll face us. Wu Ming said sarcastically. Whatever you say. Now enjoy the feast I've prepared for you. Lev smiled at Wu Ming's sarcasm. After that, Lev's figure disappeared like a screen without electricity. This king will crush that bastard. With that, Gilgamesh's spiritual form disappeared. It seemed that he had entered the Yuanzhong mountain. Don't we need to take care of this king? Roman smiled awkwardly. Roman's intention was naturally to be careful. However, Wu Ming shook his head. She's not angry enough to need us to remind her. Gil can help us find the way. You're really relaxed. Gadotsi smiled awkwardly. Anyone who had a willful follower like Gilgamesh would have a headache. However, Wu Ming was very relaxed. I think I know her the best in the world. Don't worry, nothing will happen. Let's go in quickly. Then everyone entered the big hole. However, the moment they entered, Wu Ming felt as if he had passed through a layer of film. Then he found that the people behind him had disappeared, and his surroundings had turned into a maze-like stone wall. Is this an enchantment? Wu Ming frowned. It was probably the enemy's noble phantasm. Wu Ming could feel that it was an enchantment, and its level was not low. This is troublesome. After all, Wu Ming and the others had the advantage of having more people and being able to work together. However, the enemy's unknown servant used a noble relic to separate them, which was quite a disadvantage. It seems that I have to hurry up. Saying so, Wu Ming looked at his gloved left hand. Then, Wu Ming began to explore the labyrinth. It was actually very easy to crack this type of noble phantasm, that was, to get out of the labyrinth. However, in Wu Ming's view, this labyrinth was quite difficult, and he was afraid that it would take a while to crack it. However, it was better to move forward than to wait in place, and Wu Ming could feel a slight connection with Olga Marie. Da-da. At this moment, the sound of footsteps in night boots could be heard. Wu Ming looked at the two figures in front of him, ready for battle. Altoria and Leviticus. Welcome to Chaos Labyrinthos. Lev was the first to speak, looking at Wu Ming with a pleasant expression. Chaos Labyrinthos? Is that the name of this noble phantasm? Wu Ming began to think. Yes, I'll tell you directly, this noble phantasm is held by a monster named Militanos, but then again, it's really easy to control a berserker. Lev directly told Wu Ming the servant who held this noble phantasm and laughed at him. So your purpose of separating us is to defeat us one by one, Lev? Wu Ming smiled indifferently. That's right, but don't be mistaken. I don't want to use King Arthur's sacred sword. Lev admitted generously. I think so. Wu Ming sneered. The feeling between Wu Ming and Lev was comparable to life and death enemies, and they would not let go of the opportunity to kill each other. You didn't leave this era, but stayed. I'm afraid it's because of this, right? Wu Ming asked. Yes, I don't know why, but when I think of killing you with my own hands, I feel very happy. Lev grinned and looked at Wu Ming ferociously. Spare, you go and deal with the last master of Chaldea. I specifically left them behind. Lev ordered Altoria. Altoria did not say a word and left step by step. It seemed that as Lev said, she wanted to deal with Wu Ming with her own hands. Wu Ming thoughtfully looked at Artoria, who was leaving. He always felt that Artoria obeyed Lev's orders for another reason. Then let's begin, assassin. Lev laughed ferociously, and his body began to squirm and change. As for the others, Gilgamesh looked at the empty space around him. This seemed to be the center of the labyrinth, and it was the size of a few football fields. Standing opposite Gilgamesh was a spearman in golden armor. A rat that escaped dares to appear in front of this king again? Gilgamesh looked at Karna with disdain. I have no choice. Only I can defeat you. So the master sent me here. Karna said emotionlessly. Then are you ready to be cut into pieces? Instantly, countless golden ripples appeared behind Gilgamesh. Karna, who was opposite him, also raised the spear in his hand that was transformed from the Brahmastra. Stheno and Euryale looked at the labyrinth where only the two of them were left, and looked around cautiously. At this time, a scarlet eye emerged from the shadows of the labyrinth beside them. Cuchulain put his staff on his shoulder and looked at the white-haired, red-clothed man with two swords in front of him. He smiled. You must be Archer. How ironic that you're using two swords. Didn't you want to fight me with your staff? The unknown heroic spirit said calmly. You're right. Cuchulain put his staff in a spear position and pointed it at the unknown servant. Come on, Archer. After that, Cuchulain rushed forward. The unknown heroic spirit also stomped his feet and faced Cuchulain. Anna raised her scythe, and the person behind her grabbed onto Anna's cloak in fear, not daring to look at Sakura Madou. Opposite them, a man with two spears and a mole at the corner of his eye stood there. Dirty, Anna suddenly said. I'm sorry, but this is irresistible. Blame it on the fact that you're women. Godotzi and the others came to a huge underground cavern. I'm afraid this is the depths of the cavern. It seems that Assassin and the others were separated from us by some unknown means. Olga Marie analyzed. At this time, the sound of iron boots stomping on the ground was heard. The Dark Knight King appeared in front of everyone. Everyone's battle on every battlefield had begun. Chapter 370. Wu Ming looked at the giant flesh pillar with countless huge eyeballs in front of him, and then looked at the black mud-like liquid that it was emitting. He was even more certain that it was related to the origin black mud. It's just like Darius, Wu Ming said in disgust. Although the shape was different, the feeling that this giant flesh pillar gave Wu Ming was the same as the black mud giant that Darius controlled back then. Ha ha ha, this is my true form, demon god pillar Flawless. The giant flesh pillar made a sound from nowhere. Then it was Leaf's voice, but it was filled with magnetism. I've already heard about you from the other demon god pillars. With just an assassin, you won't be able to defeat me. The demon god pillar Flawless said confidently. I see. Are all of you demon god pillars a whole? Since Flawless said, we are waiting, and after learning about Wu Ming from the other demon god pillars, Wu Ming guessed that Flawless and the other 72 demon god pillars were a whole. That's right. We are a group that is more advanced than an individual human. The demon god pillar swayed. The demon god pillar that pierced the sky gave off a feeling that it would fall. Then let's begin. As he said that, Wu Ming's eyes turned red. In an instant, countless fog emerged from Wu Ming's body, blocking Wu Ming's figure and the giant demon god pillar Flawless. The dark mist city. On the other side, outside Yuanzhong Mountain, Iskandar carried Zhuge Kongming and drove the divine might wheel to the entrance of the Big Hollow. Oh, it seems that they have entered the Big Hollow, Iskandar said as he looked at the entrance with traces. But my noble phantasm can only sense Chaldea's master, and a group of people. I can't sense the other servants. Zhuge Kongming frowned as he thought of something bad. You're right, it's my old enemy. Suddenly a young female voice sounded. Judging from his tone I see. Zhuge Kongming instantly knew who the visitor was. At the top of the mountain, an ancient China chariot was parked there. A blonde woman wearing ancient clothes and holding a feather fan stood on the chariot. Oh, is this someone you know, Kongming? Iskandar asked. My old enemy Sima Yi. Zhuge Kongming frowned slightly as if he had thought of something. Just as you thought. Master already knew that you would betray him with the Conquest King. Therefore he has already summoned the 7 servants. The woman named Sima Yi waved her feather fan and said with confidence. Ha ha ha, if that's the case, there's an ambush here. Iskandar was not sad but happy at the thought of an ambush. He started laughing loudly. After all, I've already thought of this situation, so there's nothing to worry about. Zhuge Kongming said calmly. Together with his handsome face, he looked like an aloof Prince Charming. Oh, is that so? Then take this move of mine. As he said that, several tentacles suddenly shot out from the ground and wrapped around Iskandar's divine might wheel. If Wu Ming and the others were here, They would definitely be shocked because they had seen these tentacles before. Ha ha ha, just tentacles. They're not enough to suppress me, the conquest king. As he said that, Iskandar waved the reins in his hands and prepared to use the divine might wheel's lightning to break free from the tentacles. Moo! The two flying hoof thunderbolts roared and broke free from the tentacles. However, countless tentacles appeared in an instant, and these tentacles were much thicker than the ones that wrapped around the divine might wheel. They were like giant trees that covered the sky, and the tentacles instantly trapped the divine might wheel that had yet to fly. It's not enough. Ha ha ha. Iskandar's arrogant laughter came from the tentacles. However, these giant tentacles could not trap the conquest king. Moo! As the flying hoofed thunderbolts roared, the divine might will tore apart the giant tentacles, and then rushed into the sky. When did you start to use these things, Sima Yi? Zhuge Kongming said calmly. Hee, of course, you can use illegal means at the right time, and this isn't something that I would do. As if responding to Sima Yi's words, an entrance opened in the group of tentacles that were still dancing on the ground. A man wearing a wizard's robe with protruding eyes and pale skin appeared. Greetings, military advisor. As he spoke, the man bowed to Sima Yi. Let me introduce you, this is Castor, magician. His real name is the French Martial Gilles de Rais of the British and French war species. Because he is addicted to alchemy, he has the Castor profession. It seemed that this person was the one who controlled the tentacles. Sima Yi did not hesitate to tell Iskandar and Zhuge Kongming the real name of the man who came out from the tentacles. Gilles de Rais, on the other hand, appeared indifferent. As you can see, this is the subordinate that master assigned to me. Like a little girl who got a toy, Sima Yi smiled. And I have more than one subordinate. As she said that, a sword light flashed. Moo! Iskandar's flying hoof thunderbolt screamed and fell with the divine might wheel. In an emergency, Iskandar grabbed Zhuge Kongming's collar, jumped down from the divine might wheel, and landed firmly on the ground. That sword is. Iskandar, who was also a king, saw that the servant who released the sword light was a king. She had long white hair, rather revealing white clothes, dark skin, and a rainbow-colored sword in her hand. The girl's figure slowly appeared. I am the destroyer of all civilizations. The girl said expressionlessly. This is the Hun emperor who once conquered Europe, known as God's whip, Attila. Sima Yi introduced again. I have another subordinate, but I don't think it's necessary, so I let her move freely. Sima Yi said casually. How arrogant. This is not like you, Sima Yi. Zhuge Kongming mocked Sima Yi. Hee, other people aside. Attila with the war god's sword is enough to defeat you. Do you want to try? Sima Yi said provocatively and looked at Iskandar. Ha ha. That's exactly what I want. To be able to fight against the famous military commander Sima Yi, Marshal Gilles de Rais of France, and the Hun emperor with the title of God's whip. This is a rare opportunity. Iskandar laughed and did not look timid after losing the divine might wheel. Then let me show you my king's road. After a few seconds, the clamor outside Yuanzhong Mountain was gone, and it was completely quiet. However, the battle was still going on in a place that could not be seen. Chapter 371. On Anna's side, Anna and the guy with the dual spears were entangled together, because the other party had promised in his name that he would never harm Sakura Madu, a young child. Sakura Madu stood in place and watched Anna and the other party fight. Delamudo Odina. Sakura Madu said with some worry. Of course, she wasn't worried about the dual spear knight called Delamudo, but she was worried about Anna. Delamudo Odina was the first knight of the Red Branch Knights. He was related to Fergus, Cuculin, and even Sira. If Wuming was here, he would probably be able to recognize Delamudo. The most important thing was that the other party had dual spears and dual swords. Sakura Madu, who had read about the Red Branch Knights, knew that Delamudo's dual swords and dual spears had great power. They were engraved with special lune runes. Judging from the current situation, Demudo was summoned as a lancer, which made Janto Sakura heave a sigh of relief. After all, compared to dual swords, Delamudo with dual spears was easier to deal with. but it was only easier to deal with. At this moment, Delamudo and Anna were fighting using long and short spears. The red spear was called the magic-breaking red rose Gi Dirge, and the yellow short spear was called the sure-extinguishing yellow rose Gi Bid. The magic-breaking red rose Gi Dirge's ability was actually similar to the sure-extinguishing rune Rulebreaker. It specialized in dealing with magic items and techniques, and could completely eliminate magic. The sure-extinguishing yellow rose Gi Bid had the power to cause damage that couldn't be recovered from this spear. This was also somewhat similar to Anna's scythe, but Anna's scythe also targeted immortality, which the sure-extinguishing yellow rose Gi Bid didn't have. But because of this, the confrontation between Anna and Delamudo made Sakura Madu nervous. Delamudo was a hero who had been famous for a long time, and Anna was an immature young Medusa. In terms of close combat, Anna was quite at a disadvantage. And for monsters, the hero Delamudo had a suppressive effect on Anna. This was a characteristic of monsters that should be defeated by heroes. In simple terms, the opponent that Lev chose for Anna was really good at restraining her. In just a few rounds, wounds that couldn't be healed appeared on Anna's body. Fortunately, Anna was cautious. These wounds were only minor and did not hinder her from fighting. Although you're a lancer, you don't have superb martial arts, and your spirit base is also quite immature. It's inevitable that you'll be at a disadvantage if you fight with me. It's better to surrender as soon as possible. Delamudo began to persuade. It could only be said that he was a knight with a profound knighthood. He was still thinking about the enemy during the battle. But this was also the reason why Anna and Sakura Madu were still children. Will you let us go if we surrender? Anna just asked Delamudo back. Although my lord ordered to kill the enemy, but seeing that your master is still a child, I will plead for her. Delamudo said awkwardly. He really couldn't make the decision on behalf of his master, but he could still plead for mercy. No need to say more. Even if Anna was summoned as a child, she also understood that the weak were prey to the strong, and the weak were lambs to be slaughtered. If that's the case, then I don't need to hold back. As he said that, it seemed that Delamudo was really holding back. Whether it was the craftiness of his spear technique or the speed of his spear, it was more than twice as fast as before. In an instant, a few more wounds appeared on Anna's body. Gradually, these wounds began to affect Anna's performance. Bam! Anna was sent flying and fell in front of Sakura Madu. Sakura Madu quickly supported Anna. Sister Anna, are you okay? Sakura Madu looked at the wounds all over her body that couldn't be healed. She couldn't bear it. You've already lost. After you kill yourself, I will bring your master away safely and plead for her. Delamudo walked in front of Anna and pointed the tip of his spear at Anna. Anna looked at Sakura Madu and seemed to have made up her mind. Suddenly, Anna's eyes became rectangular in pain. Then Anna looked at Delamudo. What? After seeing Anna's glowing eyes, Delamudo knew that he was in trouble. This was at least a gemstone-level magic eye. However, just as he was about to shoot Anna, he realized that he couldn't move. I see, Gorgon's goddess. Delamudo gave up struggling. He looked at his body that was turning into stone starting from his legs and smiled. I wish you success. Although what I said was a bit disrespectful, but this time, the master can't let him go no matter what. Delamudo said with a determined gaze. He is a human, an enemy of our heroic spirits. Then Delamudo completely turned into a stone statue. Then, Anna's wounds began to heal. Now, Anna understood that Delamudo wanted to be killed from the beginning, not because he betrayed the master, but because the master had to betray him. After Anna, who didn't like to use the magic eye, used the petrifying magic eye, Delamudo didn't resist and left the stage. After all, even if he couldn't move, he could still struggle. Anna felt that Delamudo gave up struggling after he felt that he couldn't move at first and accepted his defeat. As the military advisor said, Delamudo lost. The voice of a girl that didn't sound like a human's voice came. Then, Anna and Sakura Madu began to feel dizzy and fell to the ground. This is poison. Anna's eyes began to lose focus. It was a poison that could affect servants. Then Anna tried to look at Sakura Madu. To be able to affect servants, it was a poison that could kill Sakura Madu, who was just a human girl. Don't worry, I don't have the idea of poisoning my prey. With that said, the owner of the voice walked toward Sakura Madu. Anna tried hard to look at that person, but because of the poison, she couldn't concentrate. In short, it was like being short-sighted. She couldn't see that person's face. The only thing that could be seen was the other party holding up the cherry blossoms and smiling. What a delicious food, I won't be polite. Then, Anna's eyes turned black, and she completely fainted. The battle outside continued, but it had nothing to do with Lev, who was the master of the new 7 knights, and Wu Ming, who was the backbone of the joint forces of the old servants. Feeling the thick fog that constantly destroyed his body, the demon god Pillar Flawless sneered. Do you think you can trap me with this enchantment alone? Too naive. Flawless swayed and stood in the middle of the empty city of London full of harmful fog, and said wantonly, I do have the idea of cutting off the connection between you and your servants, but this enchantment is not omnipotent. It can't trap you for a long time. Wu Ming said calmly, in that case, this will be your hiding place. Dragon of origin. Flawless said, releasing the acid fog that corroded Wu Ming's enchantment. When the acid fog was about to approach Wu Ming smiled. Flawless, I heard that you are the demon god Pillar in charge of intelligence, right? Wu Ming asked. So what? Flawless said. His actions did not stop, and Wu Ming was completely wrapped in the black fog. Then have you heard of the Savor job class? Chapter 372. In the center of the city of London filled with white fog, on the towering demon god Pillar, countless eyes were blinking. At the same time, a black fog that represented an ominous color constantly emerged from the demon god Pillar, quickly diffusing in the city of London, trying to swallow everything. And at this moment, a little golden light vaguely flashed from the black fog. Boom! As if something had exploded, a gap was opened in the black fog, and a golden light shot straight up into the sky. What? Accompanied by Lev's magnetic voice, the demon god Pillar also made an indescribable scream. Let me praise your courage first. Demon god Pillar Floros, after knowing my identity, you should have run away immediately. After all, as an assassin, I can't chase you. Wu Ming's voice came from the golden light pillar. But you didn't. You thought that I am now a clone, and you can kill me. I have to say, you are extremely stupid. The golden light disappeared, and Wu Ming's figure appeared. She had short black hair, red pupils, pure white clothes with golden patterns, and a golden headband that looked like an olive branch was firmly placed on her head. That's right, this was Wu Ming's savior. This was also the reason why Wu Ming said that he was also a trump card in front of Olga, Marie, and the others. How is this possible? Without the Holy Grail, how can you change your class? Floros said with some horror. Indeed, Wu Ming needed the help of the Holy Grail to change his class. During the battle with Darius, because Wu Ming was a class card at that time, his nature was not the same as that of a servant's spiritual body, so Wu Ming's body in the root could affect Wu Ming at that time. Now, because Wu Ming was a servant summoned by the Holy Grail, his spiritual base was different from the spiritual base materialized by the class card. Therefore, he still had to rely on the power of the Holy Grail, just like when he was in Tulifas. And Floros, who transformed into the demon god Pillar, knew this, so he was not afraid of Wu Ming. After all, the Holy Grail had been stuffed into Artoria's heart by him with the power of the demon god. Unless Wu Ming experienced a heart gouging, he could not change his class through the Holy Grail. Of course, Wu Ming did not do anything like heart gouging to Artoria. Wu Ming was able to change his class because of the Holy Grail. After all, Wu Ming had a portable treasury that could carry all the treasures in the world with him. Why would he need to do anything else? Gilgamesh's treasure vault, of course. This was also the reason why Wu Ming wanted to meet up with Gilgamesh first. When Wu Ming first came to Fuyuki City, the reason why he wanted to summon young Jill was to borrow the Holy Grail in his treasure house. After all, Wu Ming could totally cancel his promise with young Gil. Cough cough, break the promise. After all, if it were Wu Ming himself or some other powerful profession, he could have completed the mission of coming to this world alone. However, Wu Ming was an assassin, a spiritual base Wu Ming Jack the Ripper, which made things a little awkward. This could be considered as Wu Ming's punishment for cheating. However, this awkwardness was not because Jack the Ripper's spiritual base was weak, but because it was not right. Fog Knight's murder, intelligence erasure, inherent enchantment dark mist, the mist, and Mary Ripper the lady, were all powerful skills and noble artifacts. However, in the face of something like the Black Mud, it was inevitable that it would be a little difficult to resist. It was precisely because of this that Wu Ming chose to summon young Gil. This way he wouldn't owe young Gil anything. However, who would have thought that a woman would appear? Fortunately, this queen was easy to deal with, cough cough, easy to get along with. After all, they were both Gilgamesh, and they both had the Gate of Babylon. They both had the Holy Grail in their treasure vaults, so there was no difference between them. Because he didn't expect the enemy to attack so quickly, and because Wu Ming didn't have time to ask Gilgamesh for the Holy Grail, he was sent flying by Artoria's Holy Sword light cannon, of course, because Gilgamesh's Holy Grail was not the Holy Grail of the Holy Grail War. It was reasonable to say that Wu Ming shouldn't be able to use this Holy Grail to change his profession. This required Wu Ming's command incantation on the back of his left hand that belonged to Gilgamesh. The command incantation was given by the Holy Grail of the Holy Grail War. So the two were connected. In this way, Wu Ming used the command incantation and the Uruk's Holy Grail to successfully change his profession. This was the special condition that Wu Ming told Olga, Marie, and the others before. Without these two special conditions, the result of changing his profession would not be born. As for how I successfully changed my profession, you don't need to know. Wu Ming looked at the demon god pillar Floros with a benevolent look. It could only be said that Floros' intestines were green with regret. If he knew this would happen, he would have left quickly. However, there were no ifs in all of this, so Floros still had to bite the bullet. Damn it! You're just a servant. See how I'll destroy you. With Lev's angry roar, the demon god pillar also made an indescribable sound. Then countless fog rushed toward Wu Ming, followed by countless heat rays from the eyes on the demon god pillar. Swoosh! With a flash of a sword, the attacking fog and heat rays were all scattered. The sword continued to move forward and attacked the demon god pillar, leaving a deep burn mark, as if an undead creature had touched the holy light. Ah! What is this? Lev screamed, and the demon god pillar kept squirming to get rid of the pain. Wu Ming, on the other hand, was holding a platinum holy sword that looked like Artoria's Excalibur. Its name is Savior's Divine Sword. How is it? It's not bad, right? Wu Ming looked at the demon god pillar in the air. The sword that just broke the fog and heat rays was from Savior's Divine Sword. Damn it! Damn it! Damn it! Lev's voice was crazy, and it began to sound a little different from Lev's voice. By the way, now you should feel the malice of the surrounding air, space, and the whole world toward you, right? As if to verify Wu Ming's words, Floros' body began to gradually collapse. Nemesis of Evil was an EX level skill, and Wu Ming also hit the demon god pillar just now. Even if Floros had the black soil in his body, it was not easy. How is this possible? I'm the king's subordinate, and you want to defeat me as a servant. Ah! Demon god pillar Floros began to scream, and the indescribable screams filled the entire city of London. At this time, Wu Ming raised the Savior's Divine Sword. The tip of the Savior's Divine Sword began to gather a heat source, and the heat source gradually became larger, forming a constantly growing sun. So from the beginning you have no chance of winning, Demon God Pillar Floros. After that, Wu Ming waved the Savior's Divine Sword. Chapter 373. The place where Wu Ming and Lev were originally located was shattered, and Wu Ming appeared in the same place. When Wu Ming first entered, he was wearing a black trench coat and a black hat, and when he came out he was wearing a white coat with golden patterns and an olive branch headdress. Of course, the olive branch headdress was transformed by Kalas. Wu Ming, who came out of the enchantment, was also holding a green figure who was struggling to survive. That person was Lev, who turned into the demon god Pillar. At that moment Lev's green hat was gone, and his green clothes were tattered, and he looked like he was tortured to death. But in fact, Lev just ate Wu Ming's attack. Cough! Back to the topic. Wu Ming's divine blade of salvation only knocked Leaf back to his original form. Knocking back Leaf follows was the demon god pillar. It was not that Wu Ming was merciful, but it was as if the two were not completely the same person. After demon god pillar Floros was defeated, Lev appeared automatically. Looking at Lev, his spirit had been completely collapsed by the world. Lev's human personality had disappeared, and now Lev was just a medium for demon god Floros. Looking at Lev like that, Wu Ming shook his head. It's a disaster to keep him alive. Although his spirit collapsed like a vegetable, his body could still summon the demon god pillar with a specific summoning method. Noble and powerful, wise and kind, I will incarnate a miracle and lead the world to the dawn. After saying that, Wu Ming entered the magician's incarnation state. Immediately afterward, Wu Ming made a slight stroke, and several lune runes appeared. At that moment, Lev's whole body was burning. After being strengthened by the magician's incarnation, the flame produced by the lune runes was a holy white flame. In just a few seconds, Lev's body was burned out, leaving nothing behind. Since the master is here, I don't know if these servants summoned by Lev will disappear. After all, because of the mutation of the Great Holy Grail, even if the master disappeared, they would not disappear. At that moment, the entire labyrinth began to shake as if it was about to be shattered. Gil. Wu Ming looked in a certain direction. Wu Ming, who became the savior, could be said to be the closest to the master's strength. Wu Ming could clearly feel the destruction of the space. It seems that Gil is also serious. Wu Ming laughed. In truth, Gilgamesh should have done this long ago. The only reason he used the good separation sword now was probably because he saw that he couldn't take down Karna, and that Karna's frenzied attacks forced him to take him seriously. Wu Ming just waited. Originally, Wu Ming wanted to use the sword, but since someone else did it for him, he didn't need it anymore. Soon, along with a series of spatial transformations, the space around Wu Ming changed. The surrounding labyrinth turned into a super big underground hole. And in that big hole, there were more than a dozen servants, including Wu Ming. But because the big hole was too vast, some servants were far away from each other. Wu Ming looked at the servant group closest to him. Riley was sitting on the shoulder of a little giant with horns, while Stheno was taking care of the unconscious Anna, and Sakura Madu behind the little giant. Wu Ming naturally saw that Anna and Sakura Madu were poisoned, and it was a very powerful poison. So Wu Ming quickly went to Anna and Sakura Madu's side. Have you finished off your opponent? Stheno said in boredom. Although Stheno's tone was light, Wu Ming could feel that he was worried about the unconscious Anna. So Wu Ming didn't say anything. Golden ripples appeared out of thin air, and 2 bottles of potions fell from it. It was an antidote from the Yggdrasil, world tree, and it was the highest level. Let them drink it. Wu Ming quickly handed 1 bottle to Stheno, and let Anna drink it. Then he helped Sakura Madu up, opened her mouth, and poured it down little by little. Stheno also quickly poured the antidote into Anna's mouth. After seeing Anna and Sakura Madu's expressions soften, Wu Ming got up and went to the bullhorn giant. Because of Wu Ming's arrival, the bullhorn giant seemed a little irritable. Quiet down, Astrios. He's one of us. Riley, who was on the bullhorn giant's shoulder, patted Astrios' head. Then, Astrios calmed down. Wu Ming understood. This should be the Militanos that Lev mentioned. I won't ask why this big guy is with you. You must be an enemy, right? Wu Ming asked Riley, who was sitting on Asterios' shoulder. He did not care about Asterios' situation. Yes, that's right. She poisoned my sister and almost turned her master into food, Riley explained. Food? In other words, she almost ate Sakura Madu. In front of Wu Ming and the others, there was a monster woman with long horns on her forehead. She wore a revealing thin dress, and held a large blue wine gourd in her hand. Looks like my master has failed. The monster woman wasn't nervous at all. She smiled casually. Fear the one with wings. Evil people and powerful people are all afraid of me with wings. My wings will bring you curses. Evil people can't hit me. Wu Ming disappeared as soon as he finished speaking. This time, Wu Ming didn't stay behind at all. He instantly came to the monster woman's side. The divine blade of salvation appeared in his hand out of thin air. Wu Ming slashed at the monster woman's neck heavily. The monster woman's head was instantly lopped off. At this moment, the head flew towards Wu Ming, who was extremely close. It opened its bloody mouth and bit towards Wu Ming's neck. Bang! Wu Ming sent the head flying with a punch. The head fell heavily on the ground and made a loud noise. Wu Ming looked at the monster woman, who was still alive even after her head was chopped off. He had really become a monster. What a powerful skill. It reminds me of Lai Guang. The monster woman's head smiled at Wu Ming. You're the one who surprised me. You didn't die immediately even after your head was chopped off. I can only say that you're worthy of being Shitendaji, the great monster of Japan. That's right, the demon woman was none other than Shitendaji. A monster that used poison and didn't die even after its head was chopped off. It held a wine gourd in its hand and ate humans. The only one he could think of was one of the three great monsters of Japan, Shitendaji. As expected, I'm too famous. I was actually discovered so quickly. Shitendaji spoke as if she was chatting with an old friend. Wu Ming didn't do anything else because he could see that Shitendaji was struggling at death's door. She wasn't far from dying. You're really optimistic. Wu Ming said uninterestedly. Hee, after all, I'm a monster. But it's a bit sad to die in the same way as you. Shitendaji smiled and then moved her body. This is an order that Master gave a long time ago using the command seal. Run as much as you want. In an instant, countless amounts of poison wreaked havoc. Chapter 374. In an instant, Shitendaji's wine gourd exploded. The wine gourd was like a bottomless pit, releasing endless seven-colored venom. The seven-colored venom exuded a terrifying aura. Although Wu Ming could resist it, Wu Ming didn't think that the servants and masters inside the big hole could resist it. Run as fast as you can, Shitendaji's head smiled, then disappeared with his body. Only the large amount of venom was left behind. The most important thing was that the venom was still spreading at an alarming speed. Wu Ming used his phoenix avatar that had not yet exited and came to Anna and Sakura Madu's side. Let's get out of here quickly. Even servants can't resist this venom. Wu Ming said while carrying Sakura Madu. Stheno carried Anna, and Astrios stretched out his hand and let Stheno stand on it. Then Astrios grabbed Stheno and Anna in one hand, and carried Urieli on his shoulder, and began to escape toward the big hole's exit. Wu Ming jumped on Astrios' shoulder, handed Sakura Madu to Urieli, and then took out an item from Golden Ripple and gave it to Urieli. Put it on Astrios, and then infuse it with magical power. It can speed up your movement. Silent Wonder didn't think that a big guy like Asterios could move that fast. In the end, Venom still caught up to him and forced him to leave the stage. Understood, then we'll go first. Urieli was serious, which was rare for her. After Wu Ming left Astrios' shoulder, she activated the item. Astrilius seemed to have felt the blessing of this power, so he roared and quickly left the place. Wu Ming looked behind him. Not only the venom, but the ground and even the air were dyed with seven-colored venom. As expected of a monster, it left a lot of trouble even after death. Wu Ming looked helplessly at the circle behind him, then resolutely rushed toward Gilgamesh's position. Because of his phoenix avatar, Wu Ming arrived at Gilgamesh's side in just a few seconds. Because the source of the venom was Wu Ming's side, Gilgamesh's side was not affected by the venom yet. After arriving at Gilgamesh's side, Wu Ming first used magical power to burn the venom on his body. You're late, Hyenryong. Gilgamesh sat on a luxurious exclusive seat brought over from the villa. He propped up his chin with one hand, and rested his other hand on the seat. He tilted his head and looked at Wu Ming. Although it was a complaint, Wu Ming could feel Gilgamesh's happiness from his tone. Not only was Wu Ming happy, but he was also happy to meet a strong opponent. Wu Ming looked at Gilgamesh, who was sitting on the chair. There was a hole in his chest, and the spirit core that was supposed to be his heart was gone. By relying on his skill to act alone, Gilgamesh wouldn't disappear immediately after his spirit core shattered. This king was a little careless and was stabbed by that guy's Godslayer spear. Gilgamesh smiled indifferently and waved his hand. and Karna, who was nowhere to be seen, had undoubtedly left the arena. Really, I told you not to be careless. It seems that you can't do anything without me. Wuming didn't feel sad. Sadness would be an insult to Gilgamesh, so he teased Gilgamesh. You really dare to say that, Hyenryong? Gilgamesh glared at Wuming. However, Gilgamesh's anger turned into joy. Forget it. This king was happy on this trip, so I won't argue with you. Gilgamesh smiled and closed his eyes. Clatter. At this moment the sound of chains came. Immediately afterward, Gilgamesh felt something familiar touching his cheek. Gil. It was the voice of his best friend. Gilgamesh suddenly opened his eyes. A golden chain was on Gilgamesh's body, and the chain touched Gilgamesh's cheek. If it's you, this should be your wish. Wuming stretched out his arm, and the chain stretched out from Wuming's arm. Sure enough, you two know this king best. After that, Gilgamesh turned into pure magic and disappeared, leaving the chair behind. It's nice to meet you again. Goodbye, Gil. The chain made a pleasant female voice. To meet me and Enkidu again. This is your wish, Gil. The chain once again wrapped around Wuming's arm, and with a flash of golden light, the chain was hidden. Then, Wuming went to the place where Cuchulain and the unknown white-haired red-clothed servant were. When he came to the two, they were sitting down and chatting. Yo, senior brother, seeing Wuming's arrival, Cuchulain greeted him warmly. What's going on with you two? Wuming was stunned by the scene. This guy is a traitor, and his purpose is to repair this singularity. Cuchulain pointed to the white-haired red-clothed servant. It's just for work reasons. The white-haired red-clothed servant said expressionlessly. Looking at the approaching blue circle, Wuming looked at the two. Are you not going to leave? He could see that the two were not going to leave, and were ready to leave. You've defeated that demon god pillar, so you don't need me anymore. Also, I made a bet with this guy to see who can't hold on and leave first. Cuchulain smiled. Oh yes, this guy told me about the demon god pillar. Cuchulain pointed to the white-haired red-clothed servant. The main enemy has been killed, so I should go back. The white-haired red-clothed servant continued to say expressionlessly. What? You're cheating. Cuchulain said excitedly. It's your fault for being stupid, Cuchulain. The white-haired red-clothed servant smiled proudly. When they came to the big hole, the white-haired red-clothed servant told Cuchulain his purpose. He said that the enemy had been killed, and there was no need to fight anymore. After that, he saw Shitendaji's wine gourd explode, and the whole big hole began to become a poisonous hole. So he made a bet with Cuchulain to see who could hold on first. After knowing that the mastermind behind the enemy had been killed, Cuchulain, who was not satisfied with the fight, said that of course he could fight with him. That was what led to the current scene. Cough. You're bluffing. Cuchulain spat out blood, and looked at the white-haired red-clothed servant rather unhappily. The poison that had invaded here began to erode the two's spiritual base. Cough. I told you, it's your fault for being stupid. The white-haired red-clothed servant also spat out blood, and said weakly. Soon, the two turned into blue magic particles and disappeared. What a bunch of idiots. Wuming shook his head helplessly and looked at the last servant's gathering place in the big hollow. The black holy sword slashed on the white holy shield, which was extremely harsh in this big hole with only a few people. Chapter 375. Matthew. Gudatsi watched from a distance. The aftermath of the clash between the holy sword and the holy shield made her unable to get close. Olga Marie frowned and looked around worriedly. Venom was almost here. Damn it. King Arthur has been entangling Matthew. We can't retreat at all. Olga Marie had suggested that they meet up with the others as soon as they left Chos Labyrinthos, the eternal maze of the inherent enchantment. However, Artoria was not one of them, and she would not let go of the prey in front of her. In this way, until Shitendaji's wine gourd was activated and began to turn the big hole into a poisonous area, Matthew was still resisting Artoria. Ah, that guy. Does he want to drag us down with him? Olga Marie scratched her head and said irritably. Matthew has already taken 3 of King Arthur's noble phantasm, and now he's barely holding on. Gudatsi looked at Matthew, who was already a little unstable, and said worriedly. Gudatsi and Olga Marie were only humans, and they could not interfere with the battle between Artoria and Matthew. Just when the two were at their wits' end, a white gold figure rushed past Gudatsi and Olga Marie. It was Wuming. Assassin. Gudatsi and Olga Marie were both surprised, and then they were happy. Wuming nodded to the two, and then rushed to Matthew and Artoria in an instant, holding the sword of salvation and cutting them apart. Assassin. Senpai. Great. You're here. Matthew weakly leaned on his shield and looked at Wuming. Gudatsi and Olga Marie saw this and quickly ran to Matthew's side, supporting the weak Matthew. Artoria, on the other hand, stood there quietly without saying anything. Wuming took out a red recovery potion from the golden ripple and tossed it to Gudatsi. This is a recovery medicine. Give it to Matthew later, Wuming instructed. Gudatsi caught the recovery potion in a panic and nodded solemnly. Olga Marie, who was supporting Matthew, shouted seriously and nervously. Assassin, this place is about to become a poison zone. We need to leave quickly. After all, Olga Marie was also a first-class magician. She could still see that the poison that was close to everyone was a noble relic poison that was effective against servants. You guys leave first, Wuming said, raising his hand in the direction of Olga, Marie and the others. Gate. Following the recitation of the spell, a dark purple hole appeared under the feet of Olga and Marie. This was the long-awaited portal. Wah! Along with the sound of panic, the three of them successfully fell in. Don't worry, the other side of the portal is safe at the foot of the Yuanzong mountain. I'll be there in a while. Wuming said to the portal, but he didn't know if Olga Marie and the others could hear him. Snap! Wuming snapped his fingers and the portal closed. Lia, long time no see. Wuming smiled at Artoria. Artoria picked up the mask that fell on the ground and put it on her face. Come on, if you want to restore this era, you must defeat me, Artoria said and raised the black holy sword. Whether it was Wuming or Artoria, both of them knew that the Holy Grail was the key, and the Holy Grail had been placed in Artoria's heart by Leviticus. The Great Holy Grail in Winterwood City was not the huge female sculpture that Wuming obtained from the Battle of the 14 Horsemen, nor was it the cup-shaped Holy Grail in Gilgamesh's treasure vault that Wuming had used. It was a rather complicated technique. The reason why Wuming saw a Holy Grail in Artoria's heart before was just the manifestation of the Holy Grail technique. But after Lev's series of manipulations, the Holy Grail technique had turned into a Holy Grail. In short, the Great Holy Grail in Winterwood City was no longer a technique. When Wuming transformed into a saver, he noticed the strangeness of the Holy Grail through his connection with the Holy Grail. The Holy Grail in Artoria's heart was the product of the combination of the Holy Grail brought by Lev and the Holy Grail in Winterwood City. You obey Lev because you want to maintain this singularity, right, Lia? Wuming did not continue the topic of Artoria. Instead, he talked about something else. Yes, that's right, Artoria admitted frankly. It was also when Wuming changed his class through the Holy Grail that Wuming realized this. This era was a singularity caused by the Holy Grail, but the Holy Grail would also maintain this singularity. This was also why Chaldea wanted to recover the Holy Grail. Because after the Holy Grail was recovered, this era would change back due to the self-recovery of the world. And the reason why they wanted to maintain this singularity, Wuming thought it was because of Leviticus. Even if I don't accept his identification, other servants will become the ones who hold the Holy Grail in this era. In that case, it would be better for me to protect the Holy Grail, Artoria said lightly. Sure enough, even if King Arthur became a Dark King, he was still the same King Arthur, just a little bit colder. This was also the reason why he kept chasing after Matthew. That child has not fully inherited Galahad's power. She is too young. She must be trained. I knew it. Wuming could not help but laugh. Sure enough, because he did not like Matthew, who had power but could not use it, King Arthur chose to train her. That was why he kept pestering Matthew and did not let them leave. Sure enough, the Holy Grail War is a sinful consciousness. The first meeting between you and me after a long time ended in this way, Wuming said as he raised the blade of salvation. In the big hole that had completely turned into a poisonous area, black and golden light shone. Outside Yuzo Mountain, Astralis carried Uriali, Stheno, Anna, and Sakura Madu and met Olga Marie and the others at the foot of the mountain. But it was not really a meeting, because Astralis did not plan to run down the mountain. Stop at last, Astelius. You are so naughty, Uriali reprimanded Astelius in annoyance. I'm sorry. Astralis stuttered as she apologized. Because the item Wu Ming gave me was too useful, Astralis could not stop at all. She only stopped when she was about to reach the foot of the mountain. She just happened to run into Olga Marie and the others who had been teleported by Wu Ming through the portal. Senpai, are you okay? Matthew asked worriedly as he supported Gadatsi, whose eyes were already swollen. I'm fine, Matthew. Gadatsi shook her head and smiled at Olga Marie. Matthew is over there. Olga Marie pointed at Matthew helplessly. Wasn't he completely out of his mind? Matthew was even more worried now. Thank you so much, leader. Gadatsi smiled awkwardly. Senpai, let's go and rest first. Sorry for being rude. Matthew bowed slightly to everyone, and then helped Gadatsi to a nearby rock. You guys escaped too. Is that so? Stheno got down from Astralis and said to Olga Marie. Yeah. Assassins seem to have used some kind of spatial magic to teleport us here. Is that so? That means that man is still in the poisonous area? Calculating the time, the big hole in Yuzo Mountain had almost completely turned into a poisonous hole. Asterisk boom. Asterisk suddenly, there was a huge explosion. Yuzo Mountain exploded. Chapter 376. Boom. Suddenly, Yuanzong Mountain exploded. From the middle of Yuanzong Mountain to the top, it was completely destroyed by the explosion. Due to the intensity of the explosion, not many rocks fell to the foot of the mountain. Instead, most of the rocks that fell were small stones. What happened? Gadatsi was shaken to the point that he was completely awake. Senior, Yuanzong Mountain exploded. Matthew said awkwardly. Gadatsi looked at Yuanzong Mountain in a daze and realized that it had indeed disappeared. It must be caused by Assassin's battle with King Arthur. Olga Marie frowned. Wu Ming could not return safely from an explosion of this magnitude. Don't worry. His strength is far beyond your imagination. Stheno and Uriali smiled mysteriously and said to Olga Marie in unison. After all, Stheno and Uriali had accidentally found out about Wu Ming's true identity. I hope so. Olga Marie sighed. At that moment, a figure walked out from the forest at the foot of Yuanzong Mountain. However, this figure was in a sorry state. Zhuge Kongming. Olga Marie called out this figure's name. What happened? Isn't the Conquest King with you? Seeing Zhuge Kongming's sorry state, Olga Marie had a bad feeling. The Conquest King has already left, Zhuge Kongming said calmly. Then he told everyone what had happened. After Iskandar activated his Ionio Hiteroi, he brought himself, Zhuge Kongming, Sima Yi, Gilda Ray, and Attila into the inherent barrier. Then, with the support of Zhuge Kongming's military skills, Iskandar led his army and showed a crushing state as they crushed the enemy. Soon in the chaotic battle, Gilda Ray and the sea demons he summoned and controlled were all killed. In any case, Sima Yi was a rider. Thus, he managed to survive on the battlefield with his chariot. Sima Yi felt bitter in his heart. It wasn't that he couldn't win, but that he didn't have an army. Although Sima Yi was summoned as a rider, she was the same as Zhuge Kongming. Both of them had strategist skills and noble relics. In other words, both of their noble relics were almost the same. However, in the face of tens of thousands of enemy troops, Sima Yi wanted to use Zhuge Kongming's empty fort strategy, but unfortunately, he didn't even have a fort. Sima Yi had no choice but to use his relic to give Iskandar's army a debuff. Subsequently, Sima Yi used the command incantation to summon Attila, who had been killing nonstop in the army, to summon the war god's sword. The enemy servant has a command spell that can control other servants. Olga Marie was surprised. Although it didn't sound nice, it was too bold to let a tool manage another tool. After all, there was a possibility of a backlash. If the servant was fed up with its master, it could use the command spell to order the servant it controlled to kill its master. After all, the command spell was in the servant's hands. The most important thing was that the servant being controlled was the European destroyer Attila the Hun, who was known as the Whip of God. The rainbow-like lightsaber instantly wiped out almost 2/3 of the entire Ionioi's army, Zhuge Kongming said in a heavy tone. There was no doubt that Iskandar had been defeated. If it were not for the Ionioi Hitiroi protecting Iskandar and Zhuge Kongming, the two of them would have returned to the Martyr's Palace when Attila released the first wave of noble artifacts. After that, before he was completely defeated, Iskandar used his own power to send Zhuge Kongming out of his inherent barrier. As soon as Zhuge Kongming came out of the inherent barrier, he discovered the whereabouts of Olga Marie and the others. Looking at the time, the Conquest King should have already left. Saying that, Zhuge Kongming took out a cigar out of nowhere, put it in his mouth, and took a deep breath. Are you the only servants left on our side? Have the Hero King and the others all left? Zhuge Kongming asked. They are still in the Yuanzhong mountain. Looking at the current situation, I'm afraid that they are doomed. Olga Marie said in a heavy tone, looking at the destroyed Yuanzhong mountain from time to time. Then let's leave for now. We have to think about how to deal with Attila. If that guy catches up to us, we will all leave. This singularity is completely hopeless. It had to be said that Zhuge Kongming was worthy of being a military advisor. Even if his side was in a disadvantageous situation, he didn't show a trace of annoyance. Although Zhuge Kongming's words were indeed a wise choice, whether it was Stheno's group or Gadatzi's group, none of them moved. Stheno and Euryale simply thought that Wuming wouldn't leave. Asterios only listened to Euryale's words. Anna and Sakura Madu were still unconscious, so Stheno and the others didn't move. Gadatzi and Matthew didn't want to abandon their companions who might survive. Olga Marie was also worried about Wuming, so Gadatzi and the others didn't show any signs of leaving. Zhuge Kongming held the cigar in one hand and sighed. I really don't know what to say to you. Zhuge Kongming shook his head. He's here. Zhuge Kongming suddenly said. As if reflecting Zhuge Kongming's words, a white figure walked out of the forest. Destruction. Attila said slowly, exuding a destructive aura, and walked toward Gadatzi and the others. This powerful aura. Stheno couldn't help but look at Attila a few more times. Euryale and Asterios also looked serious. Matthew immediately held his shield in front of Gadatzi. Matthew, who had drunk the recovery potion, had completely recovered. It had to be said that Wuming's potion was very effective. Stheno and the other servants were already in such a state, let alone Gadatzi and Olga Marie, who were humans. Since that's the case, allow me to stall for time. After saying those words, Zhuge Kongming turned around. You guys take this opportunity to go to Yuanzhong Mountain and see what's going on. Zhuge Kongming walked toward Attila. Everyone was silent for a while. Without caring about the people behind him, Zhuge Kongming took a puff of the cigar, then held it in his hand. Speaking of which, this body's things are really good. Then, Zhuge Kongming condensed his magic, turned it into a white feather fan, and pointed it at Attila. This is the military advisor's ultimate position. Try to break it if you can. Karazinojin. Chapter 377. As Zhuge Kongming's voice fell, dark clouds appeared in the sky. Bam 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 bam. Along with 8 sonic booms, 8 huge 8 trigrams pillars fell from the sky. With Attila as the center, the 8 trigrams pillars fell in 8 directions around him. In an instant, an invisible force spread out, and Attila stopped in his tracks. A formation. Although Attila had been acting like a berserker and always wanted to destroy, he was still the king of the Hun Empire, the God's Whip Attila who had conquered Europe. Attila had also dabbled in the military of the East. The unknown force of this formation did indeed stop Attila's footsteps. It's useless, destroy. Attila raised the war god's sword in his hand as he spoke. Suddenly, Zhuge Kongming's formation was broken. Have you forgotten my existence, Zhuge Liang? The blonde girl in an ancient robe rode a chariot not far from Attila. She was the rider Sima Yi. She was the one who held Attila's command charm. On the other hand, Zhuge Kongming's Karazuno gene was countered by Sima Yi's primordial chaos array. Sima Yi, you really are a hindrance. Zhuge Kongming knew that Sima Yi was nearby, but he did not expect her to do the same as he did. Then you can return to the martyr's palace with peace of mind, Zhuge Liang. Sima Yi said provocatively. You should have sensed that our master has been defeated, and we are no longer restrained by him. Zhuge Kongming said calmly. You want to ask why I continue to follow orders, right? It's because you are here, Zhuge Liang. Sima Yi sneered. Even if I disappear and return to the martyr's palace, it was not easy to meet you in the Holy Grail War. The shame of the empty city stratagem will be washed away here. In the name of the command charm, Saber Attila, release your noble charm. Sima Yi raised her right hand, and one of the remaining 2 command charms on the back of her hand disappeared. Attila silently raised the war god's sword in his hand. Destruction. The war god's sword began to spin, emitting a rainbow light. Zhuge Kongming took a light puff of his cigar. He was ready to leave the stage. After all, the war god's sword was not something he could withstand. Clank! Suddenly, a shield appeared in front of Zhuge Kongming. Matthew raised his shield and prepared to block Attila's noble phantasm. Are you an idiot? His noble phantasm is the war god's sword. You're not mature enough yet, so you won't be able to block it. Zhuge Kongming shook his head helplessly. But we can't abandon our companions. Gadatsi walked to Zhuge Ming's side. Anyway, we're in the attack range of the opponent's noble phantasm. Since we can't escape, then let's not escape. Olga Marie crossed her arms and said proudly, I don't believe them, but that man. Stheno smiled. If it's that man, I'm sure he'll be able to save me in times of danger, just like Astelius. Euryale stroked Astelius's horn. That man? I'm looking forward to it as well. Zhuge Kongming took another puff of his cigar. With that, Attila swung the war god's sword, and a rainbow-colored stream of light rushed towards Gadatsi and the others. Matthew! Gadatsi shouted. Yes, senpai. Mashu inserted the shield into the ground. Lord Chaldea's simulating the beginning of humanity. In an instant, a huge wall of chalk appeared, protecting everyone behind it. Boom! The colorful stream of light hit the holy chalk wall, and Matthew struggled to resist it. Her teeth were clenched, her body was trembling, but she didn't move. She was sweating profusely. All of these represented Mashu's difficulties at the moment. Thinking about Olga Marie's words, Gadatsi walked to Matthew and held his hand. Hang in there, Matthew. Block the enemy's noble phantasm. 2 of the 3 command charms on the back of Gadatsi's hand disappeared. Looking at Gadatsi's determined eyes and feeling the endless power that came from nowhere, Matthew smiled and nodded heavily. Along with Matthew's shout, the chalk wall became more real and complete, and the shape of the outer wall was faintly visible. Boom! The power of the war god's sword reached the end, leaving a regretful sound on the chalk wall that it did not break. The 7-colored radiance was blocked, and the god's whip was blocked by the holy chalk wall. How is it possible? Sima Yi looked at the shield that blocked the war god's sword in surprise. If that's the case, let's do it again, Sima Yi said, raising the back of his hand again. That's it. Suddenly Wu Ming's voice came. Uft. The sound of flesh being pierced by a sharp blade sounded, and Sima Yi's heart and soul core were pierced. Uft. Sima Yi spat out a mouthful of blood, looked at the platinum blade that went through his body, and turned to look at the assassin. I see, King Arthur lost. Sima Yi's body began to glow, and little blue particles were emitted from Sima Yi's body, which was a sign that he was about to leave. Damn it. What a pity. Zhuge Liang. Saying that, Sima Yi turned into magic and disappeared. Wu Ming put away the sword of salvation and looked at Attila. Destroy. Attila said, and ran toward Wu Ming. But in the process, Attila's body began to dissipate, and Attila was about to leave. Attila looked at Wu Ming's left hand and understood. I see, so the Holy Grail War is over. Wu Ming's left hand held a small golden cube that looked like a Holy Grail. It was the Holy Grail that Wu Ming defeated Artoria. Attila was forced to return to the martyr's palace. Attila, God's whip, it's time for you to go back. Go back to your martyr's palace and continue to dream. Wu Ming said something strange, and raised the Holy Grail. Attila did not say anything, and waited quietly. With Wu Ming's unknown manipulation, Attila's body instantly collapsed, and he turned into pure magic and disappeared. At this time, the holy chalk wall disappeared, revealing the faces of Gadotsi and the others. Assassin! Olga Marie and Gadotsi shouted in surprise. Senior assassin. Matthew was supported by Gadotsi, and he said weakly, but Matthew's voice was full of joy. That man is finally here. Stheno smiled. That's too slow, Euryale said. Oh, cried Asterios, not knowing what was going on. He really came, but it's finally over. Zhuge Kongming breathed out a mouthful of smoke and relaxed. The chaotic Holy Grail War of the 21 Servants. Chapter 378. Indeed, out of the 22 servants, only 7 of us are left. Saver Wu Ming, Shielder Matthew, Assassin Stheno, Archer Euryale, Berserker Asterios, Lancer Anna, and Caster Zhuge Kongming. Wu Ming walked to the side of the crowd, holding a glowing golden Holy Grail in one hand. This glowing object is the Holy Grail that caused the chaos in this era. I temporarily used the Holy Grail to stabilize this singularity, so this singularity has not been repaired yet. In other words, you can control this singularity at will? Zhuge Kongming said lightly. Wu Ming became the guy who controlled this singularity. Zhuge Kongming meant that if Wu Ming wanted to, he could become the king of this era. Of course, not to mention Stheno and Euryale, even Gadotsi and the others didn't think that Wu Ming would choose to become the king of this singularity. Zhuge Kongming was not familiar with Wu Ming, so he deliberately said that. If Wu Ming didn't mean that, then everyone would be happy, and Zhuge Kongming would be relieved. If Wu Ming had such intentions, he was now the king of this singularity anyway. Zhuge Kongming did not have the ability to defeat Wu Ming, so there was no harm in saying a few words before he died. I'm not interested in becoming the king. You think too much, military counselor. Wu Ming shook his head lightly. Now looking at Wu Ming holding the Holy Grail, whether it was Olga, Marie, and the others or Roman, who was projected on the screen, they were all relieved. After all, if Wu Ming really wanted to do that, they really couldn't do anything. That's great, then our mission is complete. Roman had a lazy look on his face. You better cheer up, Roman. Even if all the enemies are destroyed, you can't be so lazy. Olga Marie instantly reprimanded Roman. Roman could only nod speechlessly. Yes. I know, Director. Did Mr. Cuculin and the others also leave? Matthew asked Wu Ming. Yes, whether it's Karna, Gilgamesh or Cuculin, they all left. Really? I haven't thanked them yet. Matthew said with some regret. Haha, don't worry, Matthew. You have already formed a destiny. And you will meet again. Wu Ming smiled and comforted Matthew. Yes, Assassin Senpai. Matthew's sorrow turned into joy and nodded with joy. By the way, where is Professor Lev? Gadotsi suddenly asked. Everyone then looked at Wu Ming. If it's Lev, he's dead on the surface. Wu Ming's words puzzled everyone. What did he mean by dead on the surface? I'll show you the image directly. With that, Wu Ming raised the Holy Grail, and instantly, the light shone brightly, drowning everyone. When everyone opened their eyes because it was too dazzling, the scene in front of them changed, from the forest at the foot of the mountain to a maze of tall pine trees and rocks. Is this an image? Olga Marie saw Wu Ming's trick and didn't panic. Image. Gadotsi scratched the back of her head. That's right, it's a projection. I've recreated the scene of my battle with Leviticus. After Silent Wonder finished speaking, a towering pillar appeared behind everyone. This thing is a demon god pillar, right? Zhuge Kongming looked indifferently at this huge pillar of flesh that was filled with eyes and said in detail. Demon god pillar. Roman was a little surprised. What's wrong, doctor? Matthew looked at Roman, who was unnatural on the screen. Nothing. I just learned about this thing through learning magic. I didn't expect the mythical product to reappear. Roman smiled slightly and quickly adjusted his state. However, Wuming glanced at him indifferently. As early as Wuming saw Roman for the first time, Wuming felt a little unnatural from Roman. Now that he had become a saver, silent cries saw through Roman's nature. This demon god pillar is the demon god Floros, the 72 demon gods under the command of the demon king Solomon. It appeared in the form of a demon god pillar. Wuming didn't say anything, but began to explain the origin of the demon god pillar. Demon king Solomon. Olga Marie looked at the pillar of flesh in distress, and couldn't help but suspect that the real mastermind behind the scenes was the heroic spirit Solomon. Immediately, Wuming's figure appeared in front of everyone, but Wuming's figure wasn't the current golden white clothes, but the black windbreaker and black hat from before. Then, the demon god pillar began to release the demon mist to attack Wuming. However, everyone found that they couldn't hear the sound. At such a close distance, the sound of the demon god pillar is a little too strong for humans, so I omitted the sound. Wuming explained. Although Zhuge Kongming and Roman didn't seem to believe it, they didn't say anything. Wuming did this for a reason. The conversation between Wuming and the demon god pillar involved the issue of Wuming's identity. Gudatzi and the others had already suffered a lot, so Wuming felt that it was better to tell them later. Because Wuming omitted the scene of his conversation with Lev, Wuming had already used the inherent barrier. As the scene changed, everyone's surroundings turned into a foggy city. Ah, this is Assassin's inherent barrier. As someone who had been here before, Gudatzi explained to everyone. I know you've been here before. Take a good look. Olga Marie violently pressed Gudatzi's little head, and said rather unhappily, ouch, ouch, ouch. After that, the demon mist swallowed Wuming, and Wuming used the Holy Grail and command incantation to change his class. In the end, he used the sun condensed from the Blade of Salvation to defeat Leviticus. After the projection ended, everyone returned to the foot of the Yuanzong mountain. Even if Lev had committed a heinous crime, he was still Chaldea's former companion, so Wuming didn't let them see the scene of Lev's body being burned to ashes by Wuming. Just like that, Lev died, but Floros didn't. Wuming shrugged. So that's how it is. Lev's apparent death means that the demon god pillar is still alive. Zhuge Kongming nodded. According to the demon god Floros, their demon god pillar is a whole, so I think Floros is still alive. Since demon god Floros is still alive, Lev is very likely not completely dead. After all, Lev is the personality of demon god Floros' human body, Wuming said solemnly. In other words, Olga Marie thought of something. In other words, we are likely to encounter Lev in our future operations. Roman said what Olga Marie was thinking. There's no other way. Romani, you're responsible for contacting the people of the Magic Association, and let them support us. Olga Marie said as if she was entrusting an orphan. Leader. It couldn't be helped. Even if they were comforted by Wuming, everyone still didn't think that Lev was lying when he said that Olga Marie was dead. The fact couldn't be changed, and Olga Marie had begun to accept it. At least, she had to do what she had to do while she was alive. Excuse me, even if Olga Marie can return to Chaldea, you can't contact the Magic Association in the outside world, because the world outside Chaldea has been completely burned. That you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.